Our chairs joined us, so we are getting ready. Control booth, are you good? Karen
All
and
right,
team.
good morning, everyone, and welcome to our TAB and CAC, Town Advisory Board and CAC,
Advisory.
Community, you guys are laughing at me. And I do it like 5 minutes ago. At any rate, welcome to orientation training. My name is Karen Stevens. I actually work in training here at the Government Center, and I'll be facilitating the WebEx portion of the presentation this morning. So just a few housekeeping issues before we start. You've all been muted upon entry to the meeting. If you can see yourself on the screen, we can see you also. So if you're eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or playing with the dogs or doing aerobics, yes, we can see you doing all those things. So just keep that in mind as we move through the morning. If you have questions or responses to what the speakers are saying, we have 60 people on the WebEx this morning, and we do have some folks who are live in chambers. So we're kind of going to be going back and forth. So your questions, we're going to be answering at the end of each speaker. So they won't be answering them as we go. They're going to be answering them at the end of their presentation. So go ahead and type any questions that you have into the chat at the lower right-hand portion of your screen. There may be times when we unmute you so that folks in the chamber and the speakers can hear your questions. There may be times when I read your questions, okay? So I think that's about it. We are going to be starting with Leslie Schell, our Chief Administrative Officer. You all should have the agenda with you. And so I think I'm getting the signal that we are ready to go ahead and start.
Great, thank you.
Someone asked about the materials that are normally handed out at the meeting. Those were sent to you this morning. They were an attachment to an email.
Great, thank you, Karen.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Leslie Schell. I'm the county's Chief Administrative Officer. I know some of you who are returning are used to seeing Alex Ortiz in this spot. He has retired as of August of last year. So Janine D'Erico and I have kind of assumed some of the responsibilities that Alex previously had oversight over. Janine is our Assistant Director in Administrative Services. So congratulations to you guys who've been appointed and elected. I know some of you are being reappointed. So we appreciate your service to your community. Okay, some technical issues here. And the role that you all have as members of these community committees is extraordinarily important and very valuable to us at the county as we perform functions that impact your community. So thank you for that service.
And you should be able to see the presentation on your screen. It's in one of these little squares.
Okay.
And you can set that up through your layout so that you can see it in a bigger, you can see it larger.
Okay, so the first thing on our agenda today is we are going to, our chairwoman, Marilyn Kirkpatrick, is going to administer your oath for you. For those of you here and on the WebEx, the clerk will be reaching out to you for paperwork to complete that oath. I also wanted to introduce staff that those of you who have served on these boards before are probably already familiar with. Those are our liaison staff that work closely with our commissioners. I am going to start in the back of the room. Kelly Benavides. I think I just tripped on your name. Sorry, Kelly. It's hard to speak with this thing on. Will Covington. Amelia Smith. Blanca Vasquez. B. Martinez. Anthony Manor. I'm sure I'm missing a couple of folks. Oh, and Stephanie Sibley. She's new to our office. She'll be working with Commissioner Miller. We're missing, oh, they're behind me, that's why. Tiffany Hesser, and Mike Shannon and Megan Holzer are also our folks assisting with that, and they are not here today. So thanks to them for helping and supporting you and helping you in the community. So at this point, I think, Marilyn, we are ready for you to administer the oath, if you would like to do that. They're having trouble hearing, so off your mask. They should be able to hear you.
I'm taking off my mask so that everybody can hear. We have wipes here though, so this is a system that we normally do. But first and foremost, on behalf of all of the county commissioners, I really want to say thank you for willing to serve. It is a big part of our community, and the commissioners like hearing directly from the community on what's going on out there and what makes sense for the neighborhood. So on behalf of all of the county commissioners, thank you. And we look forward to 2021 being a much brighter year and being busy and being in person. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start with the oath. So if I could ask everybody to raise their right hand. You can stand if you'd like, but I'm not sure. I can't see what they're doing on WebEx, so hopefully they're not eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and playing with the dog. So if you could raise your right hand, and I'm going to go slow because that's more comfortable for myself. So, and if you could just follow along. So I'm going to say I, and then please state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support, protect, and defend the Constitution and government of the United States, and the Constitution and government of the state of Nevada against all enemies, whether domestic or foreign, and that I will bear true faith, allegiance, and loyalty to the same. Any ordinance, resolution, or law of any state notwithstanding, and that I will well and faithfully perform all the duties of the office of town board of which I'm about to enter. So help me God. Under the pains and penalty of perjury. Congratulations, you are official. So with that, enjoy your time today. Know that we have some of the best staff to help you, and the liaisons do yeoman's work. So they are available, and don't be afraid to ask questions because it's a lot easier to ask them now. So thank you and have a great day.
Home. And I can't see anybody.
Commissioner Gibson, is that you?
No, my name's out of
No.
the no.
Okay,
No, but I am on.
great. I was just going to toss to Commissioner Gibson, who'd like to say a few words as well.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for your willingness to serve. Those of you who've been serving for 15 years, whoa. And the institutional knowledge that you bring along is something that we really cannot replace very easily. So we appreciate your incredible and remarkable service. For those of you who were appointed a week ago, thank you so much. You are willing to do something that is so critical in this community. And one of the things that has brought home how important you are is our inability to have the town boards work as they were working because of the pandemic. Our locations where we meet, in most cases, are not large enough to really have meaningful representation in them anyway. So we're anxious to get town boards back to work, and I can't tell you how important that work is. Over the years that I've been in government, I was the mayor in Henderson 12 years and now in the commission 3 years, and I am in awe of the enormity of the work, the elbow grease that planning recommenders put in. My experience is that the 4 people that are on Whitney that I appoint and the 2 on Paradise that I'm responsible for the most part, know the properties, know the questions to ask, and are dialed into what's happening in the neighborhoods. That takes a lot of work and a conscious effort to be aware of the things that are happening. As was mentioned, we have a remarkable staff, and the folks from our commission offices, in my case, it's largely Blanca Vasquez, but our people who serve there bring back the report. They're able to report on the detail that they observe in the town board meetings. It's extremely valuable to us. For the most part, we don't try to reach out and tell you how we want you to vote. We have too much to do to know everything that's coming. And I want you to know that we appreciate the value that you add. So my hope is that 2021 is a new year, a real new year after what we've been through. The vaccine is now available and we're ramping up as fast as we can, and hopefully everyone who wants it is going to be able to get it in short order, and that will make a big difference for us. Thank you so much for what you do. Thank you for being the kind of people that were eligible, and thank you for being the kind of people who are willing to carve out the time necessary. Best to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And thank you, Madam Chair, for administering the oath. For those of you on WebEx and in person today, what will happen is the clerk has a list of all of your names and will be submitting a form to your mailing address. So once you receive that, please complete the paperwork and return it to the clerk's office. Those documents will not require notarizing. For those who will be watching this meeting and not attending today in the future, you will need to have your oath of office completed and notarized, and we can help coordinate that for you at that time. So I just did want to mention that all of the commissioners, most of the commissioners will be dropping in at some point today, so we'll be announcing them as they come. You're all probably pretty familiar with them already, but that just highlights the importance of the work that you do, that they want to spend some time with you today. So we'll be announcing them during the course of the day. So the next item on our agenda is I'm going to provide a very brief overview of the tabs and CACs so that we can kind of get ready for some more in-depth conversation. Tiffany is going to provide that for us today. And then we will have presentations on ethics and open meeting law, as well as comprehensive planning will be providing some detailed information about the zoning and planning process. So that's kind of the content of your day. We really don't have time built in for breaks, so if anyone needs to take a break, please feel free to do that as you need to. There are restrooms just immediately on either side of the outdoors of these chambers, and I understand there are refreshments out front. So all that administrative stuff is taken care of. So I think we are ready to move on to the presentation. So for those on WebEx, hopefully you are able to see the presentation. So the town advisory boards obviously are formed pursuant to NRS, and we also have sections in our code that cover their foundation. They are for the unincorporated town areas. The CACs are also formed pursuant to NRS and also covered in our county code. And these are generally for outside of boundaries of the incorporated cities, areas that don't reside within the boundaries of the unincorporated towns. These meetings are subject to open meeting law, NRS Chapter 241, which you'll be hearing about later today, and the Nevada Ethics and Government Law, NRS Chapter 281, which you will also be hearing about later today. One important factor is that these meetings require a quorum. So as you're appointed and elected to these boards, your commitment to attending the meetings is very important so that we can ensure that we can conduct the business on those agendas. Next slide, please. As you know, your TAB and CAC members are either appointed or elected. 5 of our town advisory boards are comprised of elected members. Those are Bunkerville, Laughlin, Moapa Valley, and Searchlight. 8 of the TABs are appointed by the county commission, which recently occurred. Those are Enterprise, Indian Springs, Mount Charleston, Paradise, Spring Valley, Sunrise Manor, Whitney, and Winchester. Your CAC members are appointed by the county commission, and there's 6 CACs in total, covering Lone Mountain, Lower Kyle Canyon, Good Springs, Mountain Springs, Red Rock, and Sandy Valley. As you can see, these boards are diverse and cover a very large portion of our community, and very different needs and issues and concerns in all of those areas. So the next slide shows that the roles of the TABs and CACs, as Commissioner Gibson and Commissioner Kirkpatrick eloquently indicated, you're very vital to assisting the county commissioners in the governance of our unincorporated town and areas. You're representatives for your community members and the residents of your respective towns and areas. You make recommendations to the commission based on community input. You're kind of our bridge to the community to make sure that we're understanding the issues and concerns that we sometimes may not otherwise have that direct connection to. You handle things such as long-term planning, zoning, public works, public parks, and you provide input regarding the concerns and problems to our commission. We also ask that you communicate regularly with your community members in your towns or areas. So as a board that's subject to open meeting law, you're going to operate under the same rules that the county commission does, and that includes open meeting laws, your meeting conduct, your public comment periods, and kind of how you administratively function as a board. You'll be getting more information about that later. And then you are a representative of Clark County and your respective commissioner. And your input is very valuable in advising us on how we move forward with issues that are in front of us. So I told you it would be brief. That was brief. This is our website. Obviously, there is a lot of information available to you on the website. We have a Town and Liaison Services page that lists information about each of the individual boards, their meeting schedules, their bylaws, and their minutes. That's all available. And the TAB and CAC manual is also available online, which Blanca will be going over a little bit later today. We are recording today's events, so those folks who weren't able to join us today can do their training as required, and we'll be posting that on the web for future use. Does anyone have any questions? Again, there's going to be a lot more detail coming, and those folks might be more appropriate to answer any of your detailed questions. Yes. Janine's going to make her way around with the microphone so that we can hear your question and the folks listening can as well.
I just had one brief question on the returning of the forms that you said would be mailed out. Mm-hmm. Is that an option to return those also by mail, or do they have to be hand delivered back? You didn't say, so I don't know.
Yeah. They can be mailed back to us.
Thank you.
Yes. It's an unusual time for the COVID, so. Any other questions? Okay, great. I am going to turn it over to Miss Tiffany. Before I do that, I'm going to clean off the microphone for you. I'd like to turn it off before I do that. This is going to be loud. Is this your copy? I don't want that. I didn't clean that off. Thanks.
Good morning, folks. How's everybody doing?
Lovely way to spend a Saturday with you. I want to thank those of you that showed up in person and appreciate that you're respecting our social distancing. And for those of you I've been watching who's been logging in online, and these are certainly unusual times. I think for those of you that are returning board members, I think we all miss sitting around tables and having this be a social introduction as well as an introduction to your duties. So we're going to get through these times, and hopefully we'll be all able to gather again in our former fashion and have future opportunities for that. You'll notice on your agenda that it did say that Megan Holzer and I were going to be doing this. Megan was not able to make it in this morning from Sandy Valley, so I will do my best to channel her ruralness, and you'll see she helped in the planning of preparing this. You'll see from some of the graphics that they've got the Megan touch, so we've still got her here with us, okay? So I'm going to go over in a little more detail your roles, everybody's roles in the town board process, both for staff as well as for board members. A little bit of it is repetitive, but I think it's worth repeating. As we have new people joining us, we get a lot of questions about, town boards. How did they come about? What is even, the premise of them? So for those of you that have lived in cities or other counties in Nevada, you'll notice we don't have town boards anywhere other than Clark County. That is by design. I've listed again the NRS codes and county code chapters that specify this. In NRS, it is town advisory boards and citizens advisory councils are for counties in Nevada whose populations are over 700,000. So that means Clark County. The next largest county is Washoe County. I think they're even under 500,000 currently. So that's basically Nevada revised statute speak for Clark County. Your terms of office are 2 years. So for those of you that didn't know what you're signing up for, you get 2 years with us. And hopefully you'll make it through that and we'll all have a good time together. TABs and CACs should address issues pertinent to Clark County. These are county boards. Anything that you're discussing, deliberating on, should be under the county's purview. So the things that automatically go to your town board agendas and are placed on there by staff are planning and zoning items, ordinances. As a town board, you also have opportunity to weigh in and express concerns that you'd like to go on to the county. You also have a great opportunity in your communities to disseminate information. People come to the town board when it's not always feasible for them to come here and sit in these chambers and participate in, maybe it's the daytime meetings, maybe it's the drive that's challenging for people. There's a variety of reasons why folks are much more comfortable participating at their local level, their community level. So these boards are advisory by name, by intent, and your role is to make recommendations to the Clark County Planning Commission, the Clark County Board of Commissioners, and various county departments. Everybody has expressed it today, and I'm sure as some other commissioners drop in today, they will express how much your input is valued. And we frequently, as liaisons, get to hear how, but nobody cared, nobody listened, or they disagreed with what we suggested. I just want to remind everyone, and I do on a regular basis, don't think that because maybe your ultimate recommendation or input wasn't agreed with or acted upon, don't think that that means it isn't valued. You know, when your recommendations or your input goes on up to the Planning Commission or Board of County Commissioners, they have various things from their perspective, just like your perspective representing your local community is how you live in it and how you view it. the elected officials or appointed officials for Planning Commission on the other boards, they have a variety of demands and perspectives that they have to represent. So also remember, not everybody interacts with their county electeds just by town board. So while you may not have heard something at a TAB or CAC meeting, doesn't mean folks aren't reaching out to us on these. So our offices frequently get lots of phone calls, we get lots of emails, we get lots of in-person visits prior to COVID, and so there's a variety of different means that folks have to communicate with us that maybe didn't happen at the time that it went to town board. I think the other thing to remember is, although ultimately something may have been approved that feels like it was something you all didn't think should be approved or agree with, things change a lot. So the town board input plays a big role in crafting conditions, concessions from applicants, even policy decisions get morphed. So what you heard may have changed by the time something ultimately gets approved at a further board, and your input was part of those changes. And I actually chose this logo because I was thinking of Megan, but we get a lot of, well, you know, the rural communities don't get as much attention, not as timely, maybe don't have as many resources. And then from our urban areas, I hear, well, hey, wait a minute, you know, I have one urban town with over 200,000 residents that currently doesn't have a single community center. So sometimes there's that, wait, per capita, we're not getting as much. So I just wanted to put a reminder of the grass isn't always greener, although in this scenario, you see the lone sheep saying the grass is greener out here. And I think you can factor in, I think the urban sometimes feel like they're in the pen, and that's the rural on the outside, and vice versa. But please know that we do appreciate all of your input, and we strive really hard. I cover a commission district that has urban and rural boards, and many commissioners do, and we really do try to vet out things and make sure that all of our communities and all of our constituents are getting a fair amount of consideration and attention. So this is just a reminder, and especially for our new folks, there are 13 elected and non-elected town advisory boards, and we've listed them here. There are 6 citizens advisory councils, and those are listed here as well. Some of you represent communities that have just one commissioner representing the entire community. Others, there are towns and areas that may have multiple commissioners, county commissioners covering them. So that factors into how you interact with the county. There is usually one liaison responsible for a TAB or CAC, but you may find that you interact with another commission office as well as you're expressing opinions and relaying information. So know that we're all here to support you. And while your commissioner, maybe right where you live, doesn't have the liaison that covers your town board, know that you're always welcome to reach out to us. If you're not sure who is appropriate to reach out to, go to the liaison who's covering your town board and have them refer you to whoever is the appropriate person or office, okay? All 19 TABs and CACs function in the same capacity. This is important for a variety of reasons. Any citizen of Clark County, regardless of where they live or where they're doing business, has a right to have the same process. That doesn't mean that the individual unique characteristics of your community and or their applications aren't going to be considered. It's just a reminder that we need consistency in how folks are able to interact with their government. And we often get concerns, well, it's unique here, it's different here. That absolutely is true, and that's part of why we have all these opportunities to interact rather than just the one meeting where a decision is made. But those differences should come out in your deliberations, in your recommendations, in your comments and feedback that you provide. The process and protocol should be the same, like I said, for anyone interacting with their local governments. So by design, all TABs and CACs have very similar bylaws. You can find those on the web pages. I think Blanca will go over that. If you're not familiar, please make sure you're familiar with the bylaws for your board. And you will also notice when you look at postings that we have standardized agendas. And that is by design as well, so that everybody is getting a similar experience. Now, your actual items on your agenda might look very different. If you poke around when you have some time on the website, you'll see the rural towns, agendas look quite a bit different than, say, maybe Enterprise or Spring Valley, where we have a bunch of zoning items that are the majority of our items. So differences in maybe what you're discussing, but the how it looks, how agendas look, and the processes and protocols that we follow should be similar. So we'll go over some duties and responsibilities of all members. And I think some are common sense, but in practice, it's tough to be reminded and stay on point with this. Read your agenda and backup materials in advance. It's, the first time that you're seeing something shouldn't be when you're sitting down at your meeting. And I know different boards have different preferences of how they receive their information. I think almost everyone receives the agendas and backup in advance electronically. Some get hard copies. They wait till the night of the meeting to get their hard copies. I think some other boards have ways that they get that information from their secretaries in advance. But regardless of how you're receiving the information, give it a glance. You might not read every single page, every single detail of something that's in the backup, but know what's coming up on your agenda and know if there's big items, things that look like, uh-oh, do a little extra work on that and be prepared so that you're not, caught off guard. It's obvious to the members or to the public when they come. If they're more prepared than we are at the meeting, that's an awkward dynamic. Obviously, show up on time. Nobody likes to come to a meeting that they're either excited to have their project heard or they're excited to come give their input about the project, and we're not ready. So, and I will acknowledge that there have been some challenges and will continue to be for the foreseeable future with COVID challenges and stuff, that we get a little bogged down, and we're doing our best. On that note, we don't have a firm date. We hope to be starting our town boards and CACs again by the end of January, but we will see what kind of state orders and such come out, and obviously our safety of all of you, all of us, and all of our constituents are the most important. When you receive your agendas and the information on them, you may choose to visit the locations, do a little additional research on things. Like I said, basic backup material should be provided, but you may decide to go out, visit a site, see what it looks like. Blanca will be going over some resources, including open web. If you don't necessarily want to drive out and visit sites, but you want to get a sense of what's around there, our open web mapper is a really useful tool. I'm in it all day, every day. Kind of helps to give that aerial view of, is this a project that's going to be in the middle of other homes, other businesses, occupied areas? Is it the middle of nowhere? It's empty. What do the road networks look like? So particularly on planning and zoning items, if you don't drive out and visit the sites personally, there's always that opportunity to do that from your computer at home, and it's really useful. And sometimes that perspective is helpful even if you have visited the site in person, because when you get that view from up above, you really get an appreciation for what the lay of the land is that feels different than on the ground sometimes. Make sure at your meetings that you be engaged, ask questions. Everybody should try to jump in and make motions once in a while. Making sure those motions are clear, are understandable to your fellow board members, to any applicants that are before you, and most definitely to any audience members that are participating. At the end of a motion being made, everyone in the room should understand what is going on. And admittedly, some of these applications get complex. Discussion and deliberations are often very long, but the worst thing is when people are walking out of the room saying, "What just happened?" and it happens. It happens because these are very engaged residents in our different areas, very engaged board members, and sometimes we even as staff have to do a whoa, wait. If you as a board member ever feel you don't understand the motion that's on the table, ask for it to be repeated. We frequently do in the boards I cover. If the secretary maybe isn't catching exactly what we think we all heard, we'll stop, slow our roll, go back, repeat the motion, and make sure that everyone's on the same page. If you're not getting it and you're unsure, I guarantee other people in the room are feeling the same way. So you as board members should take that opportunity to jump in and say, let's make sure we're all understanding the same thing. And to remember in that process that motions should be made after all the deliberations have been had. It's very confusing when in the middle of a motion, we start adding things or saying, well, because so-and-so said. So sometimes it's going to happen as you're making a motion that it gets a little confusing or you might want to backtrack. I would urge you to go back and restate the motion if that starts to occur during the middle of your motion, just so everyone's on the same page. No one board member, the chair, the vice chair, or any one member should be dominating the discussion. It's certainly true that some people are more comfortable speaking out and being more vocal. Some people are just by nature soft-spoken or less likely to jump into a conversation. But all of us have been in scenarios where one person appears to be running the meeting or one person appears to be swaying the opinions and the conversation, and that doesn't feel good from the other side of the table. Everybody should feel that anything that they're bringing for consideration or discussion is balanced, that everybody is engaged. And that doesn't mean the opposite, that every board member doesn't need to speak on every item. If it's a simple item, if it's a non-controversial item, if you really have no strong opinions either way, don't feel the need to drag these meetings out longer and talk just to be talking. But make sure everybody is engaged in some way. And if you're the person that is the most comfortable speaking up, sometimes it's really helpful, especially with newer board members, to find ways to help engage them and maybe ask an opinion or something once in a while if you can see that it's not naturally coming out of them. I think that feels good for everybody participating in the process from either side of the table. No one on a board should appear to advocate for one side or another. You have strong opinions and you get to express those opinions in your motions and your final recommendations, but you shouldn't be arguing on behalf of any application or any presentation. You should be discussing and deliberating, but not making the argument for folks or taking one strong side and trying to, maybe wear people down to agree with you on the other side. You certainly, and we want your opinions and we want there to be good discourse and a variety of opinions expressed, but it shouldn't be your job as a board member to be pushing the application or project. We do some other types of training where we do some mock town advisory boards and CACs. And one of the things that is challenging, especially as a new board member, and when we do these mock trainings, is to remember that all deliberations are public in this process. We follow open meeting law, which our DA will be going over with you all. So remember that your discussion and consideration of these items should be public at the meeting. You shouldn't be discussing with your colleagues in advance. The second you guys get your agendas, there shouldn't be phone calls and emails flying around and, hey, what did you think of this one? Or, hey, what are you going to do about that one? That's not the way we do it. In this process, all of the deliberations are intended to be public, and sidebars, you know, the leaning over and speaking to your colleague next to you, it's going to happen sometimes during board meetings. It may be, hey, what time is it? Hey, did you get the update on the game? Maybe, you know, but there shouldn't be long whispering and sidebars and things like that happening during the meeting, because the perception from the public side of things is, you guys are talking about what's on this agenda, and wait, we're not getting to hear it as the public. And this is part of our process, is for the public to be able to be engaged in these discussions, deliberations. The public comment portion of your agendas, as I mentioned, they're standardized agendas, so there are 2 opportunities for public comment. One near the beginning of the meeting that we typically hold for comments about anything on the agenda, and then there's a public comment section at the end of the meeting. Then there is also during discussion items, almost all boards take public comment on the actual item being considered. The public comment portion should be when the public is speaking to you as board members. That shouldn't be the part where you guys are engaging in the deliberations. It's challenging, and I realize we discuss a variety of different topics on boards, but we should try to keep the back and forth at that point from happening. Let the citizens, the audience members come up, ask their questions, and then they get answered, hopefully at the end of that. It shouldn't be a back and forth at that point. That way everyone feels that they're getting heard equally, and you know, that we're treating things fairly. I can't read my own writing. Maybe I need to put my glasses on my... Oh, supporting the chair and following meeting protocol. This is tough because we have varied opinions on these boards, and you may not agree with what the person who's chairing the meeting feels about something. And we want that discourse. That's the whole point of having these boards. So you certainly should feel comfortable expressing your opinions, but don't derail a meeting. Don't try to engage the audience. I think we've all been at meetings like that, like, you know, that there's a board member saying, stand up, and, you know, you're sitting there, show decorum, show respect to your colleagues, and even if you disagree with them, have that through conversation on your board discussion, and don't try to disrupt the meeting because you disagree. And it's tough. We deal with very important issues in your communities, and it's challenging to not be passionate. We want your passion, but we also want your decorum. So obviously, if you're not going to be able to attend a meeting, please let both your liaison and your TABS or CAC secretary know with as much advance notice as possible. We understand everybody's going to have last-minute things that come up, and you might not know in advance. If you know, or it's looking like there's a good chance you're not going to be able to attend a meeting, whether it's a month in advance, a week in advance, earlier in the same day, we appreciate as much advance notice as you can give us. We sometimes have challenges with quorums. If we don't have a quorum of the board, we are not able to consider anything on that agenda. We would much prefer, as would your colleagues, to know that in advance. Unfortunately, it happens sometimes. People have lives out of here. We have vacations, we have work commitments, we have illnesses that pull our attention away in different directions. But if we're not able to have the meeting, we certainly don't want other folks rushing to get there and be part of, being told, oh, no, turn around and go home. Some of you drive pretty far for your meetings. Some of you are rushing after work to get to something. So just please always show that professional courtesy to all of your colleagues. Being respectful. I don't think anyone doesn't understand what this is. In action, it's challenging. There's just an acknowledgement of that. Like I said, we get passionate about things. So remember that anybody coming before your board, whether they're presenting an idea, an actual zoning project, looking for your feedback in other ways, should be treated with respect regardless of the nature of the item they're discussing and perhaps their personal history with you. Part of being in representing small communities, so the idea of the town board as opposed to the planning commission or board of county commissioners is that we're getting into what's going on in your community. There's a much better chance that you all are going to have someone presenting in front of you that you know, that you live next to, that your kids go to school with, that you go to church together, and you're going to run into in the community. With that comes history and preconceived ideas sometimes about what's coming before you. And that's okay, but go ahead and relay those respectfully. And we want to model a tone for our audiences of what we expect. And I think everybody has seen examples of meetings quickly getting out of control. For those of you that are returning members, we often insert a kind of funny clip here where meetings get out of control. And unfortunately, I think some of our examples in the past have even involved the throwing of chairs and things like that. I think this year in particular, we don't need a video. I think we've all seen examples of poor behavior and disruptive behavior in a variety of settings. We don't need to tell each other, that that's not what we don't want to have happen. Just showing some decorum and setting a tone. And it spills over rapidly. If we have a chairperson that's barking at people, being aggressive with people when they come up, that's going to make the speaker, the applicant, the audience members. So it's imperative that everybody in this process be part of setting that tone, modeling that tone. Then, when things do start to go off course, it's much easier for staff or the chair to say, hey, wait a minute, that's not how this meeting is going to go. You don't have a leg to stand on if that's how you're treating each other as board members or how we're treating people that come up to the podium. Then we can't turn around and expect them to be behaving with professionalism and courtesy. So I just urge you to be mindful of that. I think we do a really good job. I've attended some very, very controversial hearings at both the town board and at the county commission as well. But I think all of you do an amazing job, especially considering that you might be returning to the same block as somebody that you disagreed with, but just stay on that. Nothing that you all are deliberating on is partisan. It shouldn't become partisan. We can all be neighbors and live harmoniously amongst each other, even if we have a difference of opinions. You want to use a little discretion and maybe some extra patience with folks who are attending your meetings for the first time.
It's hard to remember that because so many of us see the same faces over and over, whether it's your report outs from staff or other departments, that it's the same people all the time, or if you have a high number of zoning items, you see the same representatives very frequently, or certain people in the community that are doing more than others, so you see them regularly. Please remember when someone comes to a meeting and you get a sense that this is their first time that they've participated in a meeting, they don't understand all our rules. There's a nice little part on our agenda that says all of that, so we can always redirect them and remind them and have a little more patience if they come and they're nervous and they're not prepared. And yes, we know that everyone should be, and I believe is, told what they need to bring to meetings. When you're up there as the, we like to say mom and pop, you built a shed in your backyard, didn't realize, you can even have contractors come out and build sheds in your backyard that don't tell you, and they should know that this didn't meet a setback or something like that, and now you're coming in because, you know, your neighbor has complained that it's too close to their wall or something. Just a little recognition for when this is someone's first time or they're inexperienced, and help them along. That's not advocating for what they're asking for, but help them through the process part of things a little bit. And where we may get a little more impatient with folks who should know better, remember that some folks just really don't know this process. Another important thing is to be treating applicants the same at the end of the meeting as at the beginning of the meeting. Some of your meetings go on very long. I have been in meetings, including in 2020, that went till almost 1 a.m. So it is very challenging when you're hitting midnight and you may or may not have eaten before your meeting, to be patient, to express the same sympathy, concern for items that were at the beginning of your agenda. But it is very important that you set that at the beginning. We all know when we walk into these meetings, if we have a room full of people, we need to set those ground rules immediately and make sure that everyone is getting treated the same, because it's not fair to the person who has the item near the end of the agenda that has sat through the extra time being given, or, you know, bending the rules a little bit at the beginning of the meeting, and then at the end of the meeting it becomes a hurry up, come on, we're tired, we're hungry, everybody's tuning out, everybody's, you know. So if you get a sense that this is going to be an agenda that is going to run long, make sure you're preparing for that in advance. Remain attentive in side conversations. Once again, when we have those little side conversations, folks out in the audience don't know what you're saying. You know, it could be something very innocuous, like what you know, just getting clarification on something. They could think you're deliberating on an issue that they're not getting to hear about. They could think you're tuned into the game instead of your board meeting, and that's not fair to them to not know. So it's going to happen occasionally that you might have a question of one of your colleagues or something, but there shouldn't be long extended. It's also very distracting. Some people kind of are good at multitasking, and they might be a little chatty and still think they're paying attention. Other folks, that's very distracting for, so avoid those side conversations. We are all slaves. I know, you see, I brought mine right up here. I'm talking to you all and reading off of a presentation, and what did I bring with me? Hydration and my phone, because we all think we can't live without these devices. So understandably, you all have lives, you all have concerns, you have families. You might have your phone, you might have your laptop in front of you, and often you might be using those to look up things on the application. You might be looking at the map while someone's talking to you. You might be checking code while someone's up there presenting. Just make sure that if you're doing that, that it's apparent that you're still paying attention. You know, there's nothing more frustrating to your colleagues, to presenters, to audience participants when somebody is doing this the whole time someone's talking. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't think I'm on camera. What I was doing was looking at my phone, for those of you that are looking at a presentation as opposed to my face. And then after the presentation, I pop up, engage, and ask questions that were already stated. So we know there's going to be competing priorities and distractions, but please make sure you're paying attention on the important things being brought before you. Before I go on to the next section, which is duties and responsibilities of the chair, we have a county commissioner. It's actually the commissioner that I work with, Commissioner Michael Naft, who would like to pop in here and say a few things.
Well, thank you very much, Tiffany, and thank you all for your attention today and for taking the time to be here. I also, before I start, just want to take a minute and really sincerely thank Tiffany Hesser, but all of our colleagues at the county who helped make this presentation possible. A lot goes into this training that you may or may not see or be aware of, but it really is something that is of high value to myself and to all of my colleagues, because it is really an opportunity for you to learn, listen, and take back to your communities some really valuable information and really do the job that you've been asked to do. Excuse me. And then if I could just thank each of you. This is a true commitment to your community, and you don't have to do this. We're asking you to do a lot of work. We're asking you to engage in your community, in your neighborhood, as Tiffany was speaking about, in some cases stay for very long, lengthy meetings. We're asking you to prepare in advance and to be really thoughtful as you deliberate. So I just, from the bottom of my heart, thank you and let you know that you may not always see an item follow through the whole process, but please know that the comments you make in your town board and CAC meetings, that the conditions you may or may not put on an application as it goes through the process, those are things that I take very seriously. I know the rest of the commission does. I know the planning commission does when they go to the planning commission. So please know that that it is a real value and an asset to Clark County. So thank you for that. And also know that as you continue, whether you're coming back for another term or whether this is your first time out, please know that our liaisons, each of us, are here to help and make sure that you're serving the community the best way possible. So don't ever hesitate. Certainly if you're in one of the 5 townships that I represent, I hope you'll please utilize me and Tiffany in our office, but I know that's the same for any of the county commissioners and the entire team at Clark County. So thank you very much. Thanks for spending your weekend with us, learning and better understanding how you can be a real impact and a great impact to your community. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tiffany.
Hydrate. So now we will go on to the duties and responsibilities of the chair and vice chair. As you head into your first meetings, whatever date those may be set, you will be selecting your chair and vice chair for the next 2 years. And this is a very important part of the process. It can be intimidating if you haven't served as chair before. It's important to know that there has to be rotation, even if it's the same town board and citizen advisory members making up the committee. In your bylaws, it clearly states that someone can't serve as chair back-to-back terms. So there has to be somebody else stepping up every 2 years. That's by design. It is an important role, but know that we have a lot of support for you if you're unsure or uncomfortable about going into this role. There are instructions available in the presentation that Blanca's going to go over in your resource manual. There's almost a script of how you can approach items when you're chair, and until you get comfortable and familiar and it kind of becomes rote, just have that available to you. Your staff at the meeting can help you along and keep you on point. Your fellow board members can do that as well. Meeting facilitation and ground rules are also available in the resource manual, and those are good to turn to and rely on. As the chair, you're responsible for running the mechanics of the meeting. keeping everything on task, following the agenda, and with the assistance of staff there, making sure that you're not swaying off of what is allowed by open meeting law and your agenda. Clearly read each item into the record, conduct the meetings in a timely and orderly manner. Easier said than done sometimes. It's an art, and I think we all have seen people who do this very tactfully, and others sometimes that it's a struggle for, of knowing when to keep people moving along, whether it's your colleagues or folks participating in the meeting, and keeping everything flowing. So, watch other meetings if you're a little uncomfortable. You can see and emulate people that you think do this really well. Utilize your staff support at the meetings when you need to. And hopefully your colleagues on your board cooperate with you as chair. Announcing the expectation of how the interaction is going to happen at the meeting, at the beginning of the meeting, is very helpful for everyone. So at the top of your agendas, there's information on each agenda about limiting comments to 3 minutes and some things like that. You may have times that you have to limit it to less time, and it is okay to set, when we had 300 items on an agenda, and yes, that has happened, that we decided to set, I believe, a 2-minute time limit. It's okay to do that, but it needs to be consistent throughout the entire meeting. This goes back to what I was discussing about the rules at the beginning of the meeting looking the same as the rules at the end of the meeting. So sometimes you need to use some discretion and understand that while we may change things up a little bit, announce that, make sure everyone in the room understands that, and that you are really following those rules. It's tempting at the community level to have quite a bit more discourse back and forth, and that's okay. It is where folks are closer to home and should feel more comfortable, not as intimidating and a aired on television kind of meeting, but make sure that when you're doing that, if you're making an exception at the beginning and you are tempted to let somebody get up and speak twice or 3 times or talk for 10 minutes instead of 3 minutes, make sure you're ready, willing, and able to hold that up throughout the whole meeting, because it's not fair to folks later on the agenda if they aren't afforded the same opportunity. So I always urge you to stick with some of the rules that are written right there on your agenda, and it makes it easier for everyone involved in the process. You have to ensure that all speakers have equal opportunity to speak. So like I said, it can't be you get 10 minutes at the beginning of the meeting if you're a member of the audience, but then at the end of the meeting we're 30 seconds into somebody's comments and saying, come on, let's hurry up, we've all been here late. You need to manage the behavior of your board and council members. Hopefully everybody is working in cooperation as you sit on these boards, but sometimes you do have to kind of politely put some of your colleagues in check if they're dominating a conversation, if they're kind of going off topic, discussing things that aren't on the agenda, which cannot be allowed. So there is an expectation as chair that you're kind of managing that behavior. Once again, utilize your liaison or other staff at the meeting if you feel, so sometimes if you have a planning item and the deliberations start going into things that are not on the agenda, that what people are trying to discuss is when the original zone change took place 5 years ago. That's done. That zone change is already in there. You can't be deliberating about that zone change if the zone change isn't what's on your agenda. If your agenda is for a design review and some waivers, that's all you can deliberate on. So sometimes it's a balancing act of getting the history of things that you're discussing into the conversation, but you can't be deliberating on things that aren't part of what's on your agenda. Your motions and voting procedures follow the Clark County Board of Commissioners Rules of Procedure Handbook, which is available online, and Blanca will go where that is in your resources. For those of you that are here in person, I'm holding up what it looks like. And it's a good idea for those that weren't able to attend in person in our COVID times. We'll have the liaisons have some of these on hand because it is a little different, the procedures for this. A lot of folks think we do Robert's Rules of Orders. This is kind of a little, there are some differences. It's a parliamentary procedure, but how to make votes and motions and all of that is in here. We don't do seconds on things, with the exception of a reconsideration. If you've made a vote and you now realize, whoa, we did something wrong and no one's left the room and immediately you need a reconsideration, I think a reconsideration does require a second. But other than that, just be familiar with this, and we can make sure that we have a copy of this on hand for board meetings, because some of it gets a little complex when you're trying to remember how that happens. The majority of what you do, it's a simple motion and vote, and it's a majority rule. So make sure when folks are before you and they hear what your recommendation or your motion was, that they are very well aware of what the next steps are. I see people erupt in applause sometimes on controversial items when it's at the TAB or CAC, and they don't realize that this is a recommendation that is going on for further consideration. So please make sure that folks coming before you understand what happens next in the process if these are items that are moving on for consideration by other boards. It's on the agenda, but our agendas make sense to us, don't always necessarily make sense to the public. So make sure you're pointing that out and that they know how to further participate in the process. Then we have, we all have beat the dead horse. If speakers become repetitive, the chair can certainly jump in at some point. Well, we have to allow everyone who wants to speak the opportunity to speak. There certainly are ways that you can guide that. If you have, 30 more people lined up and you're hearing the same thing over and over, it might be a good time to call for a show of hands, how many people are in support. If you do the how many people in support or how many people in opposition, make sure you're always doing both sides so that people on either side, and yes, there's many times that it's 50 people opposing and no one raises their hand in support, but you have to call for it just so it feels fair and balanced. And I've been at many a meeting where there's been the one or two tentative people who do have that dissenting opinion, so make sure you're allowing for that. If folks still want to get up and speak, we do have to allow the opportunity for them to speak, but I think that as chair, you can certainly urge people that we've heard, many of these concerns. Unless somebody has something new to add, know that we're taking note of how many folks are here. For the meeting protocol, all of the comments from either the presenter or from the public should be addressed to you as the board. It shouldn't be somebody coming up and yelling at the applicant or proponent of a project, talking directly to them. The applicant or representative of a project shouldn't be turning around and speaking directly to the audience members. The point of the board is that everything is being addressed to you. That being said, these are public meetings, and the public should be able to see and hear everything that's being presented to you. None of us have the advantage of these wonderful resources that we have in this room today, or virtually, where we're able to clearly display all of the presentation items. Many of us are meeting in small rooms that maybe we have easels, we may or may not have a microphone or two. I think there's some meetings that occur in a fire station, in a bay. So I know this is challenging, but it's really important to remember that while everything is addressed to you as board members, we need to make sure that the audience is able to fully understand what's going on. Sometimes that takes a little repetition. Sometimes a board has to be turned, or people have to be allowed the opportunity to step up and clearly see some plans if you're not in a setting that they're able to do so. And but keep the interaction directly to the board. The board meetings in your communities are certainly an opportunity for folks from your areas to feel more comfortable and less intimidated about engaging in things, and probably have a little bit different type of interaction than when they come on to the further boards. But no one should be turning your meetings, and this is usually representatives, no one should be turning your board meeting into their neighborhood meeting. So if an applicant, particularly on a zoning item, has a very controversial item before them, and there's 30 people in the room, and this is the first time they're seeing or hearing it, and you have people just with a ton of questions, a ton of considerations, wanting different conditions placed on things. We don't have the ability to force a hold at the town board level. It has to be agreed upon by the representative, but you can certainly strongly encourage that. If they have not done their work to be a proponent of their own project, your meeting should not be where things are redesigned entirely at the podium. You absolutely get to, I hear some laughter, you absolutely get to make some conditions and ask for some concessions, but you shouldn't be designing the project at that point. And if they're invested in getting some portion of an approval from you all, they should be taking that time and doing that. On certain types of applications, non-conforming zone changes and such, there's a mandatory neighborhood meeting as part of the process. Other applications, they can certainly voluntarily do a meeting. And sometimes it's on a voluntary meeting, it's a good representative will say, okay, I see all these people in this room. Let me get all of your contact information, and how about next week we have a meeting and come back the following week or whenever your next board meeting is to discuss. So that can be encouraged. I've said it over and over, and it's intentionally in this presentation multiple times of just making sure that what occurs at the beginning of your meeting feels very similar to the end of the meeting, because it is just so unfair when we are all rushed and disinterested at the end of a long evening, or I think we have one afternoon board. Duties and responsibilities of the secretary. Every TAB and CAC meeting has a secretary present. This is a Megan slide for those of you that know Megan Holzer, but it was great. The cow mooed, the pig oinked, the chicken clucked, I bayed, and then we adjourned. If only it were so easy at our meetings, right? So your TAB and CAC secretary is a very valuable resource. Most of them are independent contractors with the county, supervised by the liaison. We have a couple that are covered by county staff, but they are responsible for preparing the agenda. That occurs under the direction of the liaison, input from the chair, planning department, other county departments. I know in some areas there's a lot of report outs from non-county agencies, but things that are still pertinent to your community. There's maybe fire updates, there's NHP or NDOT updates, things like that. Metro, I think, reports out at several of the rural communities as well. So the secretary prepares the agenda, posts and distributes. If you want items on the agenda, that needs to be done well in advance. There are legal requirements for when these meetings are posted and when the information is available to the public, and it can't be changed after that without violating open meeting law. And the secretary is tasked with knowing those dates. It's shifted a little bit for those of you that are aware. We shifted to a 4-day work week officially at the county. That threw that posting date off because it reads business days. So know that if you have something you want on there, be working with your liaison, your chair, and the secretary to get that information to them in a timely manner. The secretary prepares, posts, and distributes the minutes. You'll notice that minutes on your agendas, or when you approve your minutes, they are not verbatim, they are not super lengthy. All meetings are recorded, and for folks that want to hear the full discussion, they can certainly tune in. We usually get those posted pretty quickly after a meeting, whereas the minutes aren't actually posted to the public until after you approve them at your next meeting. So the quicker way to get the full content of a meeting, if folks are asking, is for them to go ahead and listen to the recording. And then the minutes should be a summary of what occurred, but we don't get into this person said this and this person said that and have that kind of detail. It's very challenging, and usually people don't feel that they were well represented if we're choosing a little bit in piece of that. Your zoning items will have a little bit more of what you might hear us refer to a NOFA format. At the end, when things are approved by the Planning Commission or Board of County Commissioners, applicants receive a notice of final action, and that's a very distinct format of what was approved, what was denied, and what conditions were attached to it. So you're going to see that kind of action on your zoning items when you review your minutes, but do know that the secretary is preparing on those zoning items a recommendation sheet that captures how many people were present, how many people were for or against something. So even though that might not appear on your final minutes, know that information is being shared with the other boards as well as going into the file for those items. The secretary will forward you notices of neighborhood meetings and other community announcements. Sometimes those then get further announced at your board. Sometimes they're occurring between your board meetings, so they're just emailing them out to you and hoping that you can help share with the community in the ways you do. Liaison duties. We coordinate the preparation of the agenda and minutes with the secretary. We help provide the items that need to be on the agenda, particularly when it's items from departments that don't regularly come. Sometimes we'll have, let's say, water reclamation wants to come talk about some big sewer project or something, and those items don't necessarily look the same as some of your other items. So we coordinate all of that with the secretary. We should be proofreading your agenda and minutes and advising the secretary of changes. We interact with our county commissioners, and for town boards that are town advisory boards and CACs that overlap into multiple commission districts, we will be advising the other commission staffs as well of these activities at our boards. We update county departments on actions at town boards. We address constituent concerns. We address, hopefully, your issues and concerns with the county. And we regularly meet with applicants, developers, representatives on a variety of issues. We attend neighborhood meetings, internal county meetings, external meetings in the community. We do our best to keep up to date on code changes. I'm going to acknowledge none of us are experts on all of county code. Don't expect us to be, but we should be able to help you find the answers in the right departments. If the staff isn't present at the meeting, at least where to go look and how we can find the answers that you're looking for. We handle intergovernmental relations and outside agency issues. And remember that we may see, as liaisons, the item that you guys are hearing, we may see 3 or 4 times throughout the process. I frequently attend a neighborhood meeting before an item comes before the TAB or CAC. I may follow it when it goes to the Planning Commission. Some of those items get forwarded to the Board of County Commissioners. Some of those folks come in and brief us before they come to a meeting. So yeah, 3, 4, 5 times we're hearing the same things. It may not feel like it, but I assure you, folks know what's going on in your communities, and it's getting forwarded to the correct departments and commissioners and county staff. And this is Megan, okay? So we as liaisons wear many hats. Detective, interpreter, teacher, magician. I think I do magic a lot. So, mediator, counselor, cat herder, one-armed paper hanger. When you see us running around looking like we're gonna pull our hair out, sometimes we feel like we're gonna pull our hair out, but we're a resource for you. Our role is not to just be a resource for the commissioners and county staff, we're to be a resource for you as well, so please utilize us in that way. Presenters and applicants, as you know, some are really slick, really well paid presenters that come before you. Attorneys, architects, engineers, county staff if they're giving you updates on projects. They may be very experienced, but the flip side of that is you also get a lot of regular folk at your meetings that are representing their items or interests or concerns for themselves. They could be very confused, they could be very frustrated with the process, going back to the shed in the backyard, why, who really cares where my shed is? So sometimes there's some further explanation of the idea that things are consistent in code and that the expectations are consistent across the county. So they may need some extra direction. Sometimes we have some language barriers. Frequently, especially because we're all in odd rooms and settings, hearing the applications, and this isn't even necessarily being hard of hearing, it's that we don't have amplified sounds at all of ours. So sometimes you may have to take the time to repeat things and make sure that anyone participating in the meetings feels comfortable and understands what's going on. When it comes to the zoning items, sometimes you're dealing with the actual person who's making the ask, like the developer. Sometimes you're dealing with a paid representative like we discussed. Sometimes the applicant is somebody leasing space. They may need a special use permit to have a service bar, and they're going to come represent their own project. And this holds true for audience and constituents as well. Some of them, we all have our regulars. I'm sure all of you have certain folks that show up to every meeting, and you're if that person isn't there in the audience, whoa, I hope so-and-so is okay, because there are regulars, so they may understand the process and know it. You also are aware when someone's walking in for the first time, trying to figure out what's going on, looking for an agenda, looking at an agenda, and looking lost, so be considerate of how experienced folks are that are participating in it. Some folks sit there through a whole meeting and don't say a word, never get up. We get to the final public comment, they still don't speak. They're just there to find out what's going on in their community. Other times you have people that you can tell the second they walk through the door, they are ready to engage, so we'll make sure that we're being cognizant of those things and treating everyone with equal respect and equal opportunity. And finally, we really appreciate, you've heard over and over, and I'm going to introduce in a second another commissioner that has walked in. We know this is an underpaid, overworked job. We'd like to give you raises, but they'd be percentage raises, so it would still amount to nothing. But, I think I just lost. Sign that I talked too long. Yep, I killed it. Okay, so sorry, we lost the battery in the microphone, so I'm switching over. I apologize to you, those of you virtually listening to clanking. But once again, we appreciate your volunteering. I put, are we on overtime yet? as your meetings go on for long periods of time, it would be really nice to be getting overtime. But know that we appreciate you. Know that we appreciate that you're stepping up. You're putting yourself out there in front of your other community members, and you're willingly putting your opinions out there. So we appreciate it, and we hope to be a partner with you and a resource for you. I think we're going to take some questions, both online and in person, but before we go to that, I would like to introduce another county commissioner who has joined us. This is Commissioner Justin Jones, and he'd like to say a few words.
Thanks, Tiffany, and I just want to echo her comments with regards to thank you for volunteering. Having been to a lot of town board meetings before I became a commissioner, and sometimes being the annoying constituent, I feel your pain. I appreciate all that you do and all that we will be doing for those of you who are new to the position. The town boards and CACs are really the front line of defense when it comes to the important items that are coming before the county commission when it comes to zoning and planning issues. And many times the developers, those that come before the town boards, they take it to heart. And if they don't, then when they come to me, I'm gonna ask them why they aren't taking it to heart. Because you guys are really the ones who are most in tune with what's going on in your area, and we really appreciate that. And I wanted to note just one other thing. We're coming up on what will be a really important time frame for being on the town boards and planning commission. Last year, we started the process for our master plan update. Hasn't been updated in large part for the past couple decades. And it's really the time for the vision for all of Clark County. And then once we get done with the larger vision for master planning, then each of the jurisdictions are going to be going through their own master planning process. And so you really have an opportunity in the next year or so to put your footprint, your imprint on what Clark County is going to look like for the next few decades. So it's an exciting time to be involved. And so I just wanted to, again, thank you for being that front line, for giving us the guidance that we need as commissioners to do the right thing and serve our community. So thank you again, appreciate it.
So I believe the plan was to take in-person questions first, and then we'll go to anybody that's chatting questions to us online. Anyone in the room? We'll get a microphone up there so everyone at home can hear us as well. This isn't a try to stump Tiffany time, okay, John?
No try to stump Tiffany time. I just have two quick questions. First of all, I want to verify something. Chair terms for the tabs are 2 years.
Correct.
Okay, that's my first one. Second one, you talked about the county site where you could look at items from an aerial view and get a grasp of the area,
Yep.
the neighborhood and everything. Could you maybe give a little bit of information as to where
So
on
Blanca,
the site that is, or what it's called?
Blanca will be going over that. We call it open web, and there is a link that is in your resource manual available online, and that's exactly what Blanca is very adept at, clicking around and showing you how to click around and find. And remember, while all of these resources are going to be available online well after your meeting, we keep them up forever, don't hesitate to call on any staff or if you're having a problem finding things. Any other questions? Okay, so we'll go to chat, I believe.
So we do have one question so far. At meetings, will there be interpreters available if we encounter someone needing ASL or other languages?
Yes, there is that availability. It has to be done in advance. I think that's, I don't have a copy of the agenda, but I believe that is included in the information at the top of the agenda. So if you get those requests as board members, make sure you're letting your liaison know as soon as possible so we can make those accommodations.
It does not appear that we have any other questions coming in online at this time.
That likely means I spoke way too long, so I am going to clear the stage. And up next, we have Steve Swiker to go over your ethics and open meeting law. Thank you. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Swiker. I'm a Deputy District Attorney. I've been with the county for about 20 years, and the subject of today's talk is ethics, open meeting law, bylaws, and abstentions. Abstentions is not really a separate topic. It's really part of ethics and the open meeting law. Ethics includes behaviors related to voting issues and can affect how the meetings are held, and includes things like disclosures and voting issues and quorums. The open meeting law concerns the manner in which the public meetings are held, including such things as agendas and other notices. Training is required for both under the law, and that's why we're here today to discuss these. Ethics. It can be pretty complicated, but fortunately the board has resolved that these be addressed in a layperson-friendly manner. A dictionary definition for ethics is that they are moral principles. They're covered in quite a few laws. There's a county ethics policy. There's the ethical standards in Clark County Code 2.42, and there's NRS 281A, as well as your bylaws. They touch upon the ethics. Good news is I'm not going to address all these in today's talk. And the more good news, in the vast majority of the cases, these different laws and policies say the same things and can be summarized and addressed briefly. The policy objectives of ethics are treating those persons and entities that deal with the government with impartiality, fairness, and equality. Another policy objective is that assuring that the decisions of the public importance are not influenced by private considerations. Another is maintaining public confidence in government, which implicates the matter of the appearance of matters, and preventing the use of public office for private gain. And here's how ethics can be summarized. Avoid even the appearance of impropriety so that we keep the public trust. Don't seek gifts or improper influence, unwarranted privileges, or preferences. Be careful about dealing with the government when you have private deals which involve government. Don't accept money for private sources for your public duties. Don't use insider information for personal gain. Don't suppress reports. Don't use government property improperly. Don't influence staff for personal gain, and when in doubt, ask for help. NRS 281A.020 provides very good and clear direction. A public officer or employee must commit himself to avoid conflicts between his private interests and those of the general public whom he serves. The increasing complexity of state and local government more and more closely relates to private life and enterprise, enlarges the potentiality for conflicts of interest. I would add that the increasing use of social media also adds to this complexity. I'll have more to say about social media in a bit. Ethics laws are not just about avoiding conflicts, but also avoiding the appearance of conflicts. Even if there's not an actual conflict, the appearance of conflicts of interest can undermine the public trust in government. Advice, reporting, and sanctions. Contact your liaison first. If they can't address the issue, then they will consult my office. The Law and Ethics Commission opinions may have the answers to ethics issue, but the Ethics Commission does not oversee the town advisory boards and citizens advisory councils. Advisory bodies are expressly excluded from Ethics Commission's oversight by the law. Concerning sanctions, Clark County Code 2.42 may impose misdemeanor sanctions of up to $1,000 in penalties and 6 months in jail. Most TAB and CAC members serve at the pleasure of the Board of County Commissioners, so even questionable conduct could result from removal from office. However, now that some are elected and either elected or appointed members to such boards can't be removed like that. That makes criminal sanctions more likely. Disclosures of actual and potential conflicts of interest. Disclosure can resolve a lot of problems. It removes the appearance of impropriety. Disclosure is only required if there's an actual conflict of interest. You should disclose gifts, loans, and other financial and personal interests. Disclosure must have sufficient information to inform the public of the potential effects of the conflict. Disclosure must be made at the time of consideration of the relevant item that involves the conflict. You should disclose with enough information, assuming that nobody knows anything about you. And as I said before, disclosure will remove the appearance of impropriety. Abstentions due to conflicts of interest. Disclosure by itself does not require abstention, but abstention for conflict of interest does require disclosure. Abstention is required if a hypothetical reasonable person would have his independence of judgment materially affected. That's kind of a difficult standard to understand, but the disclosure helps frame the hypothetical reasonable person. Abstention is not required for a general benefit, such as a vote to lower everyone's taxes. Abstention should not be lightly made because it avoids your responsibility for voting and deliberating. You must disclose why or why you will not abstain. After consultation is usually sufficient, however. If you abstain, do not participate in the discussion. Even mere statements of fact can be considered improper advocacy. This includes the public comment period. You cannot abstain and then turn around and make your arguments in the public comment period. Abstention, if required, will reduce the number of members of the public body, and by that, potentially the number required for a quorum. I'll discuss more about quorums in a bit. Commitment to others that require disclosure can include others who are members of your household, who are related by blood, adoption, or marriage, employers of members of the household, those with a substantial and continuing business relationship, and similar important relationships. Next, the Nevada Open Meeting Law. That's covered by Chapter 241 of the NRS. The most important section of this law is the first, in 241.010. It discusses the legislative intent. It says, in enacting this chapter, the legislature finds and declares that all public bodies exist to aid the conduct of the people's business. It is the intent of the law that their actions be taken openly and that their deliberations be conducted openly. The idea is that there be no smoke-filled backroom deals, and that the public be able to understand what the reasoning is of the public bodies that take the action. All the sections of Chapter NRS 241 are designed to implement this legislative policy. The topics that are covered by the law include things like what are public bodies that the law applies to. Fortunately, town advisory boards and citizens advisory councils are expressly included in the law, so there's no question about that. Also covered are what are meetings covered by the Act. This can be pretty complicated, but your meetings are clearly covered. This meeting we're having today is also expressly excluded, so we don't have to post today's meeting with an agenda. What special rules apply with regard to the public? This includes things like agenda posting and individual notice. What type of emergencies justify suspending notice? As advisory bodies, I don't think you'll ever have any emergencies. What type of meetings can be closed off to the public? You probably won't have any meetings that will be closed off to the public. If you do, it'll likely be to consider a person's character, misconduct, or health. What type of records, such as minutes, must be kept, and how the law is enforced. How is the open meeting law enforced? Well, to begin with, actions taken in violation of the open meeting law are void, but they can be corrected. Anyone harmed by a violation of the open meeting law can bring a lawsuit, or they can complain to the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General's office is specifically tasked with enforcement of this law. That office can bring civil or criminal actions for certain violations. The Attorney General's office also issues formal and informal opinions as to the open meeting law to help everyone comply with the law. The Attorney General's office has looked into town advisory boards several times in the past. Just a couple of years ago, the Enterprise Town Advisory Board was investigated and found not to be in violation of the law. A complainant had wanted to have an item placed on the agenda, and the Attorney General's office rightly found that the public does not have a right to have a item placed on the agenda. It's up to the Town Advisory Board and the county to make that decision. Luckily, we have such a thing called the Nevada Open Meeting Law Manual to help us comply with the law. It covers extensively the law, the NRS, opinions, and analysis. I recommend you get a copy of it. It's easy to find. Just Google Nevada Open Meeting Law Manual. It's updated fairly regularly, and it contains the law and analysis and how to follow the law. What are meetings covered by the Act? As I said before, it's a fairly complicated issue. There's a definition of it. It's about a half a page long. It concerns matters over things for which you have advisory powers. Lectures, social functions are generally excluded. But if you gather and you start talking business, even at social functions, there could be a problem. So if you had a meeting such as this, and you started talking, excuse me. A scam call. But for there be a meeting, there must be a quorum. What is a quorum? A quorum is a simple majority of the membership and the necessary number of board members to act in a matter. That's at NRS 241.0355. Quorums can be affected by absences, vacancies, and abstentions in relation to the quorum requirement. Vacancy, their impact is not expressly addressed in the law, and they can differ in different circumstances. As a quorum is a simple majority of the membership, we can say that a vacancy doesn't count towards the membership. So if you have a board that is supposed to be composed of 5 members, but you only have 3 with 2 vacancies, the quorum would be 2 instead of 3, as it would be for 5 members. Absences, unlike vacancies, absences do not affect the quorum requirement. Rather, they are the measure of the quorum. They determine whether or not you will have a simple majority. Abstentions act like vacancies or absences depending upon whether or not the abstention is required. If required, they reduce the membership of the board, acting like a vacancy. If not required, they do not reduce the membership and act like an absence, making it more likely there will be a quorum. Who makes the determination upon whether or not there is abstention required? The reasoning of the person making the disclosure of the conflict of interest and abstaining should be presumed to be valid. However, if plainly erroneous, the chair will make the ruling upon whether or not there is a quorum. There is also such a thing that's called a walking quorum, which is a series of meetings, individually without, but collectively with a quorum. So if you go around talking separately with other board members, you can create a walking quorum. Such meetings can be in person, but they could also be virtual. So you can have a walking quorum by email, video conference, telephone, or in chat rooms. You have to watch out that you do not collectively deliberate in such forums. That brings up the issue of social media. It can be a useful tool, or it could also be a problem. Social media is good for making announcements, but not so good for debate, because you can end up being a troll or possibly even a criminal for violating the open meeting law. It's also a danger of reducing your credibility, because as I said, you can end up being a troll. If you're insulting or say bad things, people will eventually disregard what you have to say. And as I said before, you can even end up creating a walking quorum. For social media, discretion is strongly advised. When you talk about matters over which you have advisory power, it's best to save for the sit-down meeting, which was the intent of the legislature and with the open meeting law, is that deliberations be conducted openly in front of the public. Agendas. Agendas are one of the most important parts of the open meeting laws. Agendas are not primarily to help the board members know what will be discussed at the meetings, although they do serve that important purpose. They are primarily to help the public know what is going to be discussed at the meetings. For that reason, you have to stick to the agenda. Emergency exceptions only apply to things that are unforeseen and require immediate action. You cannot act or deliberate on matters that are not on the agenda. Matters that are brought up in public comment should not be acted or deliberated upon. They should be placed upon a later agenda. Because of inconsistent practices and legislative directions, the Board of County Commissioners has directed that all town board advisory and citizen advisory councils follow the uniform agenda format. So now staff strictly control the agendas. Agenda items must be clear and complete, so generalities and vaguenesses must be avoided. A good agenda item will generally be pretty long and packed with detail so that members of the public can make decisions based upon it. However, sometimes general terms in the agenda cannot be avoided, but these should be as limited as possible and then generally used only for discussion items. Items must indicate that whether or not they'll be for actions or discussions. Agendas must spell out any rules you have to limit, within reason, comments of the general public. They must have the time, place, and location of the meeting and the locations of the posting of the agenda. They must have a public comment period, two of them, at the beginning and at the end of the meeting, or after each agenda item, and must have a statement to assist the physically handicapped. Public notices must be posted at the meetings at least 3 business days in advance and posted in 4 prominent locations, and must be provided individually upon request and posted on the internet. Agenda and backup materials must be provided to the public and at the meetings. Bylaws. By law, every board gets to review their bylaws and make any necessary changes for internal matters. Changes may be required for meeting dates. The core of bylaw authority for internal matters relates primarily to parliamentary procedure, functionally whether you follow Robert's Rules of Orders. And here we follow the BCC Rules of Procedure Handbook, which is a simplified version of Robert's Rules of Order. And as was stated earlier, seconds aren't required. Many rules from the NRS and the Clark County Code are simply repeated. They don't have to be in the bylaws, but they can't be disregarded. And it's helpful to have them handy in the bylaws. For example, the bylaws repeat that the ethical standards need to be followed, as well as a reference to Clark County Code 3.01 requiring removal of a member for 3 unexcused absences. Any changes to the bylaws will need extensive review, particularly as the legislator and the Board of County Commissioners have required a uniform plan for the framework of county commission or county administration. As advisory bodies, your role is to assist the Board of County Commissioners, and such uniformity in the bylaws helps with that. Also covered is appointment of officers and the method of resignation. Special meetings can be called by the chair. This issue came up on whether a liaison can call off a special meeting set by the chair. And the question isn't answered by the law or the bylaws. My advice is that it be a joint decision of the chair and the liaisons. Who can put matters on the agenda? The Board of County Commissioners, Administrative Services, Comprehensive Plannings, and members of the Town Advisory Board or CAC. As I said before, the public is not entitled to have matters placed upon the agenda, but it can be done by the chair or Administrative Services. And that's all I have to say. Have a happy New Year. Are there any questions? None? Okay.
And I am not seeing any questions right now from our WebEx attendees.
Okay, great. We're going to move on to the next item on the agenda, and Blanca is going to drive us through that. Thank you.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Okay. I'll speak a little bit louder. So I'm going to first start by apologizing because you're going to be seeing this part of me the whole entire time during my presentation, but this is how we have it set up. And then also, I'm going to be using the internet. I'm going to do a little bit of research for you. So if you have a little trouble seeing the screens, I would recommend now moving a little bit forward, trying to grab a seat a little bit closer to the screens, because some of the websites that I'm going to be going on to, the print's going to be tiny. So if you wanted to take just a little bit closer look, go ahead and move now. Okay, I'm going to go over a few things. I'm going to first go ahead and start off by finding our town board webpage. And as you can see, we have a I got the okay to remove my mask, so I'll make sure to stay in my glass cubicle. Uh, we've got a new website for the county. It is much more intuitive than our last and much more user-friendly, at least that's what we're hearing. And so in order to find our town board resources and our town board agendas, what we're asking folks to do is to scroll over the top, and as you just scroll right on over, a drop-down menu appears, and just over to your right, you will see town advisory boards and citizens advisory councils. So we are just one click away from the front page, and that has never happened before. So you would just go ahead and click there, and you are exactly where you need to be. Now on our town board pages, we have a menu over here on the left-hand side, which talks a little bit about who we are, our contact information. This is an old link. We're going to go ahead and fix that this coming up week because we no longer use Clark Connect. We now use Fix It Clark County. So we're going to fix that. And we're going to start off here. So these are our agendas and our minutes. Now, actually, this is all of our town boards. So there's a couple of different ways you can go ahead and access your town board or your citizens advisory councils, and that's just by scrolling over. I have a little problem do that because mostly I'm on a laptop, so you can also just click on it and then scroll down, and you'll see our urban towns and our rural towns there too. So if you are an urban town, you would just click there and then find your town board. If you are rural, you would click down here and find your rural town board. So since I am the liaison for Whitney and Paradise, I'm going to go ahead and go to the Whitney town board. And this is all of the information that's been present in the past is still here. For our new town board members, you will see that our meeting location is listed here. We actually link straight to a Google map. So if you knew or met someone that was interested in coming to a town board, you would just send them this link and then it would load directly into their Google Maps so that they can go ahead and find directions to get directly to the meeting center. And, sorry, this thing is in the way. I think I just stopped sharing. Okay. Thank you. Can we get that off of there? Okay. So if you keep on going down, of course, is our meeting time and our posting locations. Each of our town boards and citizens advisory councils post in several different locations within our townships. And so those locations are also on this page. All of our board members are also on this page. Our secretary information is here, so if you needed to get a hold of your secretary, you didn't have her email or her phone number, you can grab that here as well. And then we also include the commissioners that have jurisdiction within our townships. And for Whitney, it's both Commissioner Sigerblum and Commissioner Gibson. And we also have liaison information. So all of your liaisons' emails, fax, phone numbers will be present here. And we also have our individual bylaws. So Tiffany had mentioned earlier, in order to familiarize yourself with your bylaws for your respective town board, you can find that here. And you can certainly print that out and take a look at it as well. So if you keep on scrolling further down, this is where all of our agendas and our minutes and our audio is located. Now, I'm not sure why it says video because we don't have videos at our town boards, but we do have audio. And so if you had wanted to go back and re-listen to any of our meetings, you can certainly do that by clicking on the videos. And so that is pretty much it with our town board, our town board information. So if you could go a little bit further back to the left-hand side, you will see that we also have a resource manual. And you can just click that there. TAB CAC resource manual is just at the bottom. And as Leslie mentioned earlier today, we are recording today's training. And so this is from our training last year. What we'll do is we will divide today's training into segments, and that way if you wanted to go back and listen to Tiffany's or Leslie's or any of our presentations, you can just go ahead and go to that individual segment and click it on, and it would just be just the amount of minutes that we spoke for. So that's going to be located at the top. If you continue to move down, we also included some information that we think everyone's going to want to know a little bit more about, especially folks that were just appointed this week. If you want to do a little bit of studying about our Clark County government, we've got that information there. We also have a lot of what Tiffany had mentioned earlier today, the role of TAB CACs. We've kind of condensed that down to a couple of pages. That would be here. The process to appoint a town board member, that's located here. Why we have bylaws, that information's here. If you're curious about what your secretary's duties are, we have included all of her duties here. And then, of course, budget procedures as well. Once a year, all town boards and CACs are asked to present their request for budgets, and so we have our budget procedures as well here. After I speak today, Sammy is going to go over our zoning information, and so she will be talking a lot about all of the information that you see here. So just know that it's available here for you. Our county department and services. So we've kind of thought a lot about what other departments in the Clark County that interface with town boards a lot. And so we wanted to make it just kind of very easy for you and to link directly to those departments in this section. And then we also have access to other boards and committees and commissions here. It's just a link to that page. This should say 2021. We'll go ahead and correct that. But this link goes directly to our Board of County Commissioners meetings. So you can certainly access those by using this link. If there was an appeal that you were interested in pursuing, or if you knew a neighbor or a resident or a constituent that wanted to appeal an item that was at Planning Commission, that form is here, so you can access it here or forward this link to anyone that wanted to appeal. If you had a vacancy on your town board or citizen advisory council and you knew of someone that was interested in applying, this is where they would do it. And then we've included just a bunch of maps that we thought might be useful to you as you take a look at the county and how the county overlays with the cities. And we have a map of just urban Clark County that's here. And these are all updated, so we're going to be going through some redistricting this year. And so as soon as that process is complete, all of these maps will be updated later this year. Okay, so I'm going to come back to this here in a second, but we've also included some links to resources so that you can do your own research. That's going to be located here, which will include Open Web, Title 30 Development Code, and then just our Clark County zoning page. So Steve, so we just went over all of our open meeting laws and our ethics. All of that information is located here, so if you wanted to go home later on today and take a closer look at that, we've included all of that language or those links here. The ethics, we've kind of condensed all of our ethics into one page. So our Nevada Commission on Ethics, Nevada Ethics in Government and Law, Nevada Administrative Code Commission on Ethics, County Code Chapter Ethical Standards, our County Personnel Policy and Ethical Standards, all of that is located here. So if you wanted to, again, peruse, we've made it kind of available all on this one page. And then if you go a little bit further down, we're almost done. So outside, we have our Board of County Commissioners Rules Procedure Handbook. Everyone's invited to certainly take one of those home. For those of you that are virtually attending today's meeting, that information will be found for here. And then setting ground rules. So a lot of you that were just appointed last week may have maybe not really familiar with our public or how to run a public meeting. And so that information, it's kind of the do's and don'ts at our meetings. So you can kind of just peruse through that, take a look at it here. A lot of this information is also included at the top of your town board agendas as well. And then last but not least, I urge whoever your chair is going to be in your town board this next couple of years to print this out. A lot of our items, especially in the urban area, are zoning items, and so you have to be very careful that you open up the zoning item correctly and that you allow for the presenter to speak and that you open it up to the public to speak and you close it to the public because the public can't speak any longer, and then you open it up to the so it's a lot of steps. And so if you are a new chair, we have found that they have found this resource to be very valuable. And I recommend that the chair just print this out and put it right at the table with you to make sure you don't skip any of these steps until you really get a vibe for moving through the zoning items easily. Okay, so that is our town board resource manual. If there's any questions about that. We've got one question. Janine?
What is the actual website to get to that point?
It is clarkcountynv.gov. Sorry about that. So I'm gonna go ahead and start there. clarkcountynv.gov. This is our Clark County website. And again, we're just one click away. You scroll over government, and then town advisory boards and citizen advisory councils, and you're here. And then do we have one question on, okay. So if you have a question online, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Hi, Blanca.
Hi.
The question is, could you repeat what the new replacement website is for Clark Connect Change?
Okay, yes, we can actually go ahead and visit that site really quickly. So if you go to government and it's click it Clark County. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and just use the new search. I can't hear you. Oh, fix it. That's right, fix it. Okay, so if you type in fix it into the search, it doesn't come up. All right, let's see. So let's go to, all right, it's fix it in Clark County. I am gonna, let's see, go to government, departments, administrative services. See if it's here somewhere. Here it is. On the left-hand side, it's Fix It Clark County. And then for those of you that wanted to, if you saw something that didn't comply with our Clark County codes, this is where you would go to submit those complaints. But we'll have that on the left-hand side of our town board page here shortly. Any other questions?
Okay, we do have a couple of other questions.
Okay.
Can you show how to use the map feature,
Yes.
including checking zoning, ownership, parcel number on the left?
Yes, I'll do that next. I'm going to actually change internet browsers in order to do that, so I wanted to finish up everything in Chrome today. Or
That was another question. Do we use Chrome or Internet Explorer?
So for the most part, all of our new Clark County website does very well on Chrome. So we recommend to everyone that they use Chrome for our website. I'm going to also go over how to find a Board of County Commissioners meeting, our videos, and our audio, and everything that we provide with regards to our public hearings. It just does better on Chrome. With regards to research using Open Web, we ask that folks use the Internet Explorer. So I'm going to go ahead and go to that next if we didn't have any more questions. Nope. Okay. All right. So if we go back to our resource manual, we have provided a link that goes directly, even if you're in Chrome, to your Internet Explorer browser, and it's located here. So again, we are in our resource manual. You're going to scroll all the way down to helpful links, and then on the first bullet point, this first link, it takes you to Open Web, but it takes you to the Chrome version of Open Web, which we just don't recommend. So if you continue to move a little bit further to the right, it's the Open Web mapping application. It's going to open for you in Internet Explorer. And it doesn't. It did 10 minutes ago. I know. Okay, so that's okay. We're going to go ahead and I worked on this last night because I was having a little bit of trouble last night on it, so I can go ahead and finish the presentation using this link today. So a lot of you, when you open this up, it's going to be a little different. It's going to be a little easier. Our research tool allows us to research either by name, by parcel number, by address, and here it's just going to be a little different. So everyone is given an app or a agenda sheet, and you're given an agenda. And within your agenda sheet, you are given parcel information on a particular item. You're given an address. You're given an owner name. And so all of that will, you can go ahead and research by any of those means. So today, I'm going to go ahead and research by parcel number. So if this is your search tool, you can go ahead and type in the parcel. All right, let's try this again. All right, I'm going to try this again. What's that? Let me see. Let me go to. Nope, it's still calling with the old one. Sorry, 1 second. I'm going to try to find the other version. Do you want to see if you can find it? Okay, sorry about that. We are having a little bit of technical difficulties. We can't seem to get to Open Web off of the Internet Explorer, and it seems like the other Open Web in Chrome is just stuck. So that's where most of my presentation was going to be within these two. So we're not really sure what's happening, and we don't have an IT person here to kind of fix it in the meantime. But what we can do is we can take a look at how to research maybe site plans and things like that that are part of a zoning application. So let's go back to our internet. And this, I tested it last night. It worked last night. I tested it on a county computer, on a county property, and it worked. So let's see if it works today. So if you are interested in looking at site plans, I would ask that you go to just the search menu and then you type in records. And if you go to services, you'll see here the third choice is records. And if you go a little down, scroll down, you'll see the document, image, search, print. So this is all of our records and documents and plans that get submitted with our zoning applications. So here at the very top, you can scroll down to pre-meetings. Now, for the purpose of looking at any document that is submitted with an application prior to it being approved, this is where you want to be. If you are looking at if you want to take a look at information after it's approved by the Planning Commission or the board, you would choose this selection. But again, for the purpose of prior to, this is where you would be. This is where everything is at. So today I'm going to look at an application that has already been approved. So I'm going to go to land use zoning applications, and then you can just submit the actual application number. So today, this was an item that went to the Paradise Town Board back on in October, and the application number is 20-0446. And you hit enter, and this is all of the information the applicant was required to submit, and or letters of protest that has come in after the fact. It all gets filed away in this program. So if you're interested in looking at, say, plans, you would locate it on the list and then just click view, and you will see the plans pop up here. This particular application, the applicant submitted plans and then also pictures of every elevation of the building. So this goes for every single zoning application that is submitted to the county. If you wanted to do your own research prior to the meeting, again, this is where you would go. Is there any questions about how to access this site? Again, I can go ahead and, oh my goodness. Okay. From the search menu again, you would just type in records to access, and it'll get you right to where you need to go. Services, records, document search. Any questions? Any questions virtually?
So we don't have a question about that specifically, but someone is asking, are we set up with a county email address or computer access to be able to receive and maintain communications, given all communications are subject to public record laws, or do we use our own personal ones?
So all of our town board members can use any email that they like. You are not issued an email address by the Clark County. If you are not comfortable using your personal email, I would recommend just creating an email in Yahoo or any other internet provider or email provider, and just using that just for town board purposes.
Thank you. That's all we have right now.
Okay. Okay, so the last thing I was going to go over was how to find and listen to a Board of County Commissioners or Planning Commission meeting. So we're going to go ahead and start from the beginning. clarkcountynv.gov. Okay, I recommend doing this in Chrome. And you would just need to go to Government and Board of County Commissioners. And if you look to your left-hand side, you will see Clark County Commission agendas. So if you click there and scroll all the way down, these are all of our Planning Commission and Zoning Commission agendas. So just as a point of clarification, we reference our Board of County Commissioners meeting as a Board of County Commissioners meeting, and that's our general meeting, business meeting that happens on Tuesdays. For the purposes of zoning items, you would click all the way down here, which is the Clark County Zoning Commission. And I know in our town boards, and when we talk to our town board members, we always say BCC. It's actually the Clark County Zoning Commission. That's what we're referring to, and that's always at the bottom of the page. And so you can click through here if you are familiar with the date and time of when this zoning meeting has occurred. You would just scroll through. And looks like we go all the way back to 2012, 2011, 2010. We've got a good, quite a few available there for you. At least 10 years, it looks like. I've always found that the best medium for viewing back is the video one. MP3 audio is just, of course, just the audio, and the MP4 video, I guess it's a higher quality video, but I've always had best luck just using the video portion. Let's see. And if you are interested in watching live a Board of County Commissioners meeting, typically these meetings will populate in this area here under upcoming events. We don't have anything there because we just had our Board of County Commissioners and zoning meetings last week. But here in the next week or so, we will have, on Tuesday, we will have this area populate with our zoning commission, our Board of County Commissioners, and our planning commission meetings. So when it gets to the point where it's about to start, you would just click on the same video function, which would be located up here, and you can watch live. And is there any questions about that? Any questions virtually? Nope. Okay. All right, well, I think that is all. I apologize for not being able to show you a little bit more about Open Web. Unfortunately, again, can't do anything about technical difficulties. For town board members that have questions that really want to take a look at this, please call your liaison. They can certainly walk you through it on a later date and time. To my town board members for Paradise and Whitney, they know they can call me and ask me anytime as well. And I think that's it for today. Otherwise, do we have Commissioner Segelblum on the line? Okay. Oh, all right. Well, please welcome Commissioner Segelblum. I'm sure he's here to say a few words. Thank you.
And very few. I know you guys are definitely ready to get moving. Really, I just want to thank you all for serving, and then to explain to you how important what you do is. When these issues come to me, what I do is I ask my staff, what did the town board say? I first ask, what did the staff say? Then I say, what did the town board say? Then I say, what did the planning commission say? And then if all three disagree or whatever, then I may get involved. But truthfully, I want to know what the town board thought, because you guys are closest to real life. You understand on the ground what's going on, what the neighbors think, what the chickens think. So it's really important. But the reality is you're dealing with big hotels and you're dealing, I said, last couple weeks ago, we had something to deal with chickens. So it's you got from one side to the other, you got a lot on your hands. But anyway, thank you so much for coming out today. Thank you for serving. And we got 2 years to really go crazy. Thank you.
Okay, Sammy Rial from Comp Planning is going to do the next part of our presentation.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Sammy Rial. I'm a planning manager with the Department of Comprehensive Planning. I oversee the day-to-day functions of most of what you will see on your agendas. So with that, what I wanted to do today is go over what the Department of Comprehensive Planning is. I don't know if I have a clicker or the next slide. So to go over what the Department of Comprehensive Planning is, the difference between our master plan and zoning, and then go a little bit into what the application process looks like, what we tell customers, the information that you'll see on your agendas and some of the backup material, and then how to help you guide your recommendations and give you some pointers on really what to look at, because there is going to be a lot of information that's presented to you. But I would say at the end of the day, it's not that complicated. You just have to look at what is being proposed. So with that, we'll go through. So the Department of Comprehensive Planning consists of 6 divisions. We have what we call advanced planning. A prior county commissioner would always say that's the future planning. So the future planning is planning out what our policies are, what our goals should be for the future of Clark County. And then we have current planning that is more of the day-to-day planning for Clark County. We also have administrative support. We have our own internal GIS staff, just a few staff that help us with creating some of the maps that we need and getting the information into the system that we need and that you will see on OpenWeb if it was working today. And then we have a one-man team for nuclear waste, and then we have zoning plans examination that is involved in the review of building permits. So in a nutshell, this is an overview of the department, the development process. This isn't meant to scare you or to not necessarily need to understand, but why I wanted to show this is that it highlights where the Department of Comprehensive Planning and the staff are involved. I always say we're involved at every single part in the development process. The first part that's shown in green is really the Department of Comprehensive Planning. From there, after an application is approved, it can go through the development process, being through the building department, Public Works for any off-site improvements. We have staff that are involved in both of those processes to make sure that what they are proposing on their development plans is consistent with what was presented to the town boards and the CACs, and that it's consistent. And then lastly, when they go through to get a business license for their business, we're looking at it again to make sure that, yes, it was approved. So again, that's this example, or this diagram is just a highlight of what that process looks like. It's involved, but we're involved in every step of the way. And so I just wanted to make sure that you understood that what you are doing at the front end is really what happens, or it has a result on what happens as somebody goes through that process ultimately to start their business and open their business in Clark County. Advanced planning and current planning. As I said, advanced planning is more of the future planning. They maintain the comprehensive master plan. They coordinate the activities that happen on federal lands. I don't know if you're aware, but the BLM will release lands for sale. We participate in that. We make sure that if there's anything that is potentially released for sale, that at least we're running it through to see if the county needs it for a fire station, for a park, for a future school. So we coordinate with the Bureau of Land Management on that. And then we also participate in the planning and in the design and construction process for any trails. And then we prepare the population estimates as well. Different from current planning. Current planning, again, is more the day-to-day, the now part of the development process and the planning process, where we implement the master plan. So again, advanced planning is responsible for creating the policies, drafting the policies, and then current planning is responsible for implementing that plan. That plan is also used then to create what we call our development code, and that's Title 30. And then, so comprehensive planning, current planning division is responsible for implementing Title 30, and we also maintain Title 30. And I'll go into what Title 30 is in a little bit. But so the master plan is driven by what NRS is the Nevada Revised Statutes. It has 8 mandatory elements that are supposed to be in the comprehensive master plan. I'm not going to name them all out, but each of these plans has goals, policies, and the one that we deal with the most, the one that you'll deal with the most, is the land use plan. So the next slide for the land use element. So the land use element has what we call land use plans, land use goals, land use policies. So these policies are really driven to drive the decision-making process for development within Clark County. It maintains and it has goals and policies. For instance, a goal is to make sure that development is compatible with adjacent communities, make sure that we're reducing any impacts of incompatibility, noise, buffering, dust, mitigation. And then the land use plans are also divided into each, we call them area plans. So as you're all appointed to a specific area, we have a plan for each and every individual area along with maps. And then some of those plans have individual goals and policies. So the land use plan maps that we have, they illustrate our land use categories. And our land use categories, we have about 20 different land use categories, and they could range from residential categories that provide a wide range of densities for each of those. We have different commercial, industrial, manufacturing, some public facility, institutional land use categories. And then in the land use plan for each of the area plans, we have what we call compatible zoning districts, and I'll go into that in the next slide. But last and not least, the individual land use plans, they are updated they're reviewed for an update for every 5 years. So you will be involved in those, and as Commissioner Jones had indicated, we're in a process right now of rewriting our comprehensive master plan, and we are kind of at the midpoint of it. So as he said, it really is a great time to be part of the town boards and advisory boards to help us with formulating what those goals, what those policies will be, what the area plans will be as we go forward, because it'll be our planning document. We say for the next 50 years. It's been about 40-something since we have last comprehensively rewritten the comprehensive master plan. So it really is an exciting time to do that. To give you an idea of what the land use plan categories look like in each of the area plans, I've highlighted 2 here. One is the residential suburban land use category, and the other one is the commercial neighborhood land use category. And why I wanted to show you this is it's what staff look at when we're reviewing applications for, and I'll just use the term and I'll explain it a little bit more later, zone boundary amendments, or sometimes even special use permits. So in the next slide, what I've done is I've highlighted some important components of what the land use category consists of. So in the residential, you can see that it has a range of densities. What is density? Density is the number of units per acre. So that is what this category says is appropriate number of units per acre for that category. It also goes, should have printed out a bigger version, but it also goes on to say that, for instance, multiple family dwellings are not appropriate. So this category, what we're saying is that it's more predominantly a single family type of development that we want to see in this area. When our analysis comes out, when our recommendations come out, we use information like this to help guide our decisions. And you'll see that in our staff reports. The commercial neighborhood, also you'll see that it has some characteristics of what it should be. It says development should be sized to fit the surrounding neighborhood. So this is more of the less intense type of commercial development. And again, we use this language to help guide our decisions on what we do. The bottom of these categories include compatible districts. And I wanted to highlight this. We have two types of, if somebody wants to change their zoning, and again, I'll talk about zoning, but when we say if something's compatible, and if we say something's not compatible or a non-conforming zone boundary amendment, this is what we're using to guide that decision. So it's not an arbitrary decision on what is conforming and what is non-conforming. We're using the land use plan to guide what is conforming change and what is a non-conforming change. So for instance, if somebody came in and wanted to propose a commercial zoning in the residential suburban, obviously you can see that there's no commercial zoning that's appropriate in this residential suburban category, so we would then say it's non-conforming. But again, this is where some of the information that you'll see in the reports comes from. It comes from the master plan. So on the next slide, and I don't expect you to memorize this and know this, but it just gives you an example of how many different land use categories we have, and then the corresponding zoning that goes with each of those categories. It is just one example of the number of options or suitability for the zoning in the areas, but it really does kind of lend to the fact it illustrates there is planning that happens when we think about development in Clark County, and there should be some type of strategy. And that strategy, again, is outlined in the comprehensive master plan, and then it's implemented through the zoning. The next slide talks about the zoning basics. These are all the different zoning categories we have. Again, I don't expect you to become experts in each of these categories, but it does illustrate the number of categories that we do have and what the districts are. They range from, again, all types of residential districts to our multiple family. Multiple family is your apartments, your attached townhome products. It depends on the product type. Commercial districts, manufacturing districts. A popular one for the special districts is H1. You'll hear that a lot. H1 is basically all the resort corridor properties that are along Las Vegas Boulevard, and we have other H1 properties around. But typically, if it's H1, it's kind of not a guarantee, but it's a characteristic that you'll see the resort hotels developed on those parcels. The next slide outlines the chapters within Title 30. And this is where I'll say here, we are not expecting you to be planners. We're not expecting you to know the ins and outs of Title 30, to know all the different categories, the setbacks, the height. We want your knowledge, we want your input based on your experience within the community that you live and you're representing. But it is helpful to have some basic understanding of what our development code is and what it consists of. And the most important thing I could ever relay to anybody who is opening up our zoning code is that it is also very literal. We have a term for, we call it separation, that is clearly defined. We have setbacks. Our code is very literal in some cases, and if you ever wonder what something means, that first chapter, chapter 30.08 for our definitions, really does help. It helps explain what some of the words that you're looking at, what it means, and it can help you understand what we're communicating in our staff reports, or the language that we just roll off of our tongue as we speak so easily about planning. The next couple of chapters help with identifying the land use application process. It's the guide that we use to figure out, well, what needs to go to the Planning Commission? What needs to go to the Board of County Commissioners? What are the findings that we're supposed to make? Is it supposed to be land use compatibility? Are they supposed to propose some type of alternative? What are we looking at when we're trying to analyze and when we're ultimately making our recommendations on these projects? The next chapter for base districts goes into, again, all the different types of zoning districts that we have, the residential, the commercial, the industrial. But in this chapter, it also includes things like minimum lot size, the height, any of the setbacks, anything that is specific to that development or to that zoning district that we want to regulate. Lot coverage. And then I'll jump down to 3056. Chapter 3056 is the design standards. These are all the supplemental standards that we have. What are there for allowances for additional height? We have a lot of architectural standards in this section that we go and we look at, and you'll see waivers for those, and again, I'll get into those in a second. The global use table in chapter 3044 is something that we use on a daily basis to determine whether or not the use that they want to do is appropriate in that zoning, and you'll see it's permitted, it's conditional, requires a special use permit. So again, we use this chapter to decide or to determine what type of land use application an applicant needs in order to achieve what their project proposal is. And then that is, if they need any waivers or if they need a special use permit, that's what you'll see in the staff report. So again, this is all the information that we use when we're looking at a project to create that staff report and to analyze a project's proposal. And then lastly but not least, and I won't go into signage, but we have a section on signage. And then we have the chapters on landscaping and screening. Again, I do not expect you to become experts in any of these chapters, but just to have some knowledge, I think will help give you guys a good understanding of what we look at. I'm not an expert in each of these chapters, so I can't certainly expect that you guys are going to be experts in these chapters. The next slide illustrates the most common types of applications that you'll see on a daily basis. We have conforming and non-conforming zone boundary amendments. The two sections of the land use categories that I described earlier, again, conforming means that what they want to change in terms of their zoning, they want to go from a lower residential to a higher residential. That might be conforming. If they want, my example earlier, they have residential, but now they want commercial, that'll be non-conforming. The next one that I put on here is a special use permit. The easiest way I can describe what a special use permit is they are asking for a use that is not necessarily permitted within that district. The best example I could always give is it's a residential zoning district and they want a church. A church is a special use, and we say it might be okay so long as you make these certain findings. And so that's what a special use permit is. A waiver of development standards is just that. They are requesting to waive a standard of development. It might be something architecturally, it might be a setback, they might ask for additional height, but they're usually asking for a waiver of some type of development standard. Next is design review. Hopefully that's as simple as it sounds. You're looking at the design of an application. That'll include architectural elevations, landscaping, parking, all kinds of fun stuff that you'll get to see on the plans. Next is a tentative map. A tentative map is the subdivision of property, and this is for lots, I think it's 5 or more parcels, and you'll see the subdivisions of property. And it could be a one-lot commercial, which will just be one lot with nothing on it. The next is vacation and abandonments. This is where an applicant is proposing to vacate something that the county has either an easement over or owns. So for instance, just use a popular road, Las Vegas Boulevard. They said, I want to vacate Las Vegas Boulevard. Well, that's what a vacation means, is that it would no longer be a public right-of-way and it would go to some type of private use. There's also vacations for easements, drainage easements, pedestrian easements. So that's what a vacation is. It's basically saying that the applicant is requesting the county to give up what has either previously been dedicated or granted. Waiver of conditions, hopefully self-explanatory. Tiffany was talking about the notices of final action. Those are the conditions that are approved on a project. So if somebody wanted to change or to get rid of that condition for a revision to a project later on, waiver of conditions. The next two are the extension of time and an application for review. An extension of time, again, is just that. They need more time to complete their project. Every project is approved with some type of duration to complete or commence by, and we see a lot of extensions of time to extend the amount of time that we've given them, either because they've run into some financial troubles, some engineering, design issues that they've had to redesign their project. And then the application for review is an application that is submitted when there is a condition on an application to review something within 2 years, 5 years. Sometimes it could be the hours of operation, are the hours of operation good? Is the reduced parking for the church, has that caused an issue for the neighborhood once the church has been constructed? So usually we're specific as to what we want to have reviewed, but that's what an application for review is. Those last two applications isn't necessarily a second bite of the apple. If you didn't approve it at first, but it got approved, it's not necessarily a time to go back and say, well, we still want to deny it because we still hate it. Again, you have to look at the application and the proposal on the merits that it's in front of you. And again, we want your community input on that. The ones on the right, the least common that you'll see is when we want to change a street name, when a text amendment, if somebody proposes a change to Title 30, and then the master plan amendment and updates is just that. It's when there's a proposal to change either the words in the plans or the colors on the map. The next slide highlights what we have on our website that tells a customer when they submit their application, what their town board date will be, and also what their either planning commission or board date will be. I've worked in a lot of jurisdictions, both on the inside and the outside, and this is the first place that I have ever seen such a commitment to getting somebody to a public hearing. This is primarily dictated by NRS. NRS gives us certain timeframes that we have to take a project forward to a public hearing. But for the typical process, it's about an 8-week process when somebody finally submits their application. And then as you can see here, we have the Planning Commission meetings, the board meetings, and then the town board meetings. Planning Commission and the board meetings are basically the first and third Tuesdays and Wednesdays of every month. And then the town board meetings generally occur about 3 weeks prior to the Planning Commission or the board meetings. And again, as the months go on, we continue to update the processing calendar, but it is typically an 8-week process, and the applicants are given the meeting dates at the time they submit their application. All right, so the next slide goes into a little bit about the notification. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but a lot of our applications that will be presented in front of you require mail notices, they require notices in newspapers, and we are required to notice by NRS. The one thing we're not required to notice, surprisingly, are the town board meetings. So the information that goes out on our mail notices is a courtesy to the neighbors in the area that this application is going to be heard at the local town board. The posting or the meeting notification for the town board, or what is the official agenda, is done for the town board by posting the agenda, which is what your secretaries will do. But again, it is not a requirement that the town board meetings be noticed pursuant to NRS, but we do it as a courtesy. And you'll see an example of the mail card here in the next couple of slides. But I just wanted to highlight that it is not a requirement, but we do it. The notices that we do send out are mailed 10 calendar days or they're required to be sent out a minimum of 10 calendar days prior to the meeting. We actually send them out the weekend before the town board meeting. So in reality, the notices are going out about a month in advance of the actual Planning Commission or Board of County Commissioners meeting. We also are required to send newspaper notices. We're required for some applications, such as the zone boundary amendment, to post signs at the property. And then the agendas, as you heard before, those are required to be posted at least 3 days prior to the meeting. We have the same open meeting laws with regards to posting the agendas as the town board secretaries do. So we do ours 3 days as well. The mail notices that we do send out are dictated by NRS. You can see in the next slide, and then the slide after that is that, for instance, NRS will specify a certain distance that we're supposed to mail out our notices. Our noticing radiuses are actually greater than that. In the case that you're looking at right now, the zone boundary amendment, NRS says 750 feet from the property. And we use that and we do a radius and we send it all to the property owners. Our code actually says that it's 1,000 feet. But even if it's 1,000 feet, our code then goes on to say, or 100 unique property owners. So we will keep increasing that rate of notification radius until we get that 100 different property owners to notice. And so on the next slide, you'll see that for most of our applications, we have a 500-foot radius. In some cases, it always ends up being 700, 800, sometimes 1,000 feet more, just to get those 100 different property owners, depending on what part of the county we're in. And again, I want to emphasize that it's property owners. It's property owners that are on the county's assessor's records. We do have some property owners that have their addresses and their information protected, so everything gets sent to the county. We do hear from them sometimes that they didn't get notice. We can't send them a notice because their address is protected. So it's kind of one way or the other. And we do get a lot of people who say, I never received a notice. But then if we go and we look at our list that we have, and actually you can see online as well, it will show all the different people with their addresses and their names of who was noticed, and it even includes a map of the radius of the project and then the ultimate width of that radius as well. The next slide includes the sample of a mailed notice, and why I wanted to show you this is I wanted you to see what we send out to members of the public. The top slide is the top photo is the front of a mail notice, and you'll see at the bottom of that we have check boxes, and that checkbox says I oppose and I object, or I oppose and I support. We ask that people check that box, send it back to us. We get it in mailed format, emailed format. Sometimes people actually hard snail mail them back to our offices. The back side of that card will include what the project is. Once I show you what a staff report looks like, it really is just mimicking the top part of the staff report. What is being proposed? What are the different types of applications? And it should include a location map. You can see on the upper right-hand corner of that slide, it'll tell somebody where this project is in that area, and then it'll include, as you can see below that, the location map, the time and location of the town board meeting, and then the time of either the planning commission or the board meeting. What it will not show, in some cases we have an application that would go to the planning commission and the board. It won't show that board date, it'll just show the planning commission date. The reason being is if it was to get held at the town board, held at the planning commission, then the board date's automatically going to be affected as well. So we go meeting by meeting. So the town board, again, is the courtesy. The planning commission or the board date is either that one and only date, or it's the first of the series of meetings. But again, I just wanted you to see what it shows. And it does have a blurb at the bottom about where people can find information related to the application. It guides them to a very similar search that Blanca showed you for where they can go and look up the materials that are related to that application. So we try to put the information out there. I can't tell you that everybody reads it, but we try to put it out there so people can have those tools at their fingertips and hopefully come to the meetings a little bit more informed. But it's hit or miss, we'll admit that. The next slide shows the town board, the hierarchy of the meetings being the town board and advisory or the recommending bodies. Planning commission, in some cases it's final action. In some cases they're also a recommending body. And then the board is always final action. Either the application is appealed at the planning commission and then goes to the board for final action. Thank you. Or it goes to the board for final action, and that is, in fact, the final action. The next couple of slides will break down what a staff report looks like. And I thought this would be important just so you have a better understanding of what you're looking at when you get your agendas. Our staff, when they're drafting or when we finalize, and I say draft final, of the staff reports, this is what's sent to the town board secretaries to create those agendas. And then the backup materials that you'll get from your secretary should include the staff reports. And so you'll have that as part of your package. What's on top is the indication of what meeting date and what public hearing body it's going to. What I did not highlight, though, is the application number, because you're going to need to know what that application number is in order to look up documents on our website. And so that is right under where it says public hearing. It's on the left. It's about 5-6 lines down. It'll always start with a UC, a WS, an AR, but then that's that number. It'll be a year and then a number, and that's basically the reference to that application. The next block is the same information that's shown on the mail notices. It's a description of the project. And I'll be honest, I mean, it is not a very detailed description. It's a very blocky way of telling you what the application consists of, because how we break it down is by application type and what they're asking for based on what code says. Below the double line is a little bit more detail. So if they're reducing a setback, that'll be the place in the report that tells you, I want to reduce it from 10 feet to 0 feet. So that's where it'll be a little bit more detailed than what you get above the double line, but that's supposed to help with identifying specifically what is above. And then the APN, we have an assessor's parcel number. Blanca was sharing with you how you can look up on Open Web. If you ever need the assessor's parcel number, it's right there on the first page of that report. You can use that information. And then towards the bottom of the page, you'll see that it's, again, just a more generic, simple way of knowing it's this many lots, it's this many square feet of commercial that they're proposing, and then what it looks like. On the next slide, I wanted to have this one be all a standalone, is if you ever have any questions on the staff report and want to know, well, who do I contact at the county? Those initials at the end are going to represent the commission district, the next is the planner, and then the next is the public works staff that worked on it. The planner's initials will match what is on our contacts page under our contact list. And so you can call them directly, email them directly if you have any questions. But it's those middle initials that it's the planner who worked on it and who wrote the staff report. The next section of the staff report is really just describing what we see on the plans, what information was provided to us. General description of the site plan, any landscaping, any elevations, what they look like. We include a list of the prior applications on our staff reports. If you ever wanted to go back and look at the history, again, you go to that page that Blanca showed you, and you could type in the old application number, and you can see the materials that are related to that application. We also include in our staff reports what we call an applicant's justification. So with all of our applications, we ask an applicant to give us a justification for their project. Why is their waiver okay? Why, how is it compatible? why should their project be approved? This is their time to sell their application and really say, this is why my application is the greatest application and you should approve it. To me, it's kind of like their selling document. Sometimes some salesmen are better than others, but it is the applicant's justification. What we hear a lot, it's hilarious, what we hear a lot, even from our frequent flyers, as we call them, they'll say, look, staff said it's compatible, it's great. That's not us. We're just reiterating what the applicant said in their justification letter. But we always get a kick out of that, and hopefully you will too after you understand, now that you understand what we put in the staff report and what applicant's justification really means. So the next page of the staff report is just has a table, and it'll include a general description of the area that's around it, compatible zones, and then our analysis of the project. The analysis of the project is what we use to really say why we're supporting something or denying something, so you can get an understanding of where staff was coming from when they made their recommendation. And then as you can see at the bottom of that, it is staff's recommendation. The next slide, there's so many options and so many ways you're going to see this information. It's really hard to give it to you in a training, but I at least wanted you to know that you will see different pieces of the last part of the staff report. First is if we have any kind of quote-unquote companion applications, and what I mean by that is sometimes we'll have a tentative map going with a design review. Well, there are two applications that'll be two separate items on your agenda, but it's really one project. So it's our way in the staff report of saying, hey, there's two other applications, one other application, but really it's one project. And then we have alternative recommendations. The prior slide that I showed you, it just said approve. Sometimes it just says deny. But sometimes we decide to break down the recommendations, and it might be approve this part and deny this part. And sometimes what we'll have as well is in that case where I said that the Planning Commission would be a recommending body, that we don't necessarily notice the board. Under the recommendation, if it is an application that needs to be forwarded to the board for final recommendation, you'll see that under the recommendation. You can see that here where it says, this item will be forwarded to the board on such and such date at such and such time. So that's an indication that there will be two meetings for this application. It goes back to a prior slide where I said, please remind the people who show up to the town board that there's, the Planning Commission meeting, that there is a board meeting. Sometimes there's a lot of neighbors will say that will show up to a town board and we never see them at the Planning Commission or the board meeting because sometimes they think that the town board was it. If the town board denied it, then the board's going to deny it or the Planning Commission's going to deny it. And that's not necessarily the case. So we want to make sure that people are involved, that the town board is really just one step in the process and that there's a public hearing process as well. And just as you want to hear from the neighbors so you can make an informed decision, so does the Planning Commission and so does the board. At the bottom of that slide, I also include some different conditions. And there's recommendations and conditions that are based on the project type. When we say resolution of intent, and you'll see that for a non-conforming zone boundary amendment, what we're saying is, you know what, we'll change the zoning if it's approved after the project's complete. We just don't think that it's appropriate to change the zoning now because for fear of what could be developed if the zoning was changed. But based on the project you showed us, it's good. So if you want to develop that project and that project is developed, we'll change the zoning. The next condition says no resolution of intent, and that we'll go forward and we'll change the zoning, meaning that zoning is appropriate, it's good. It doesn't matter what project is going to go there in the future. It's just that's the right zoning for the area, and we'll go ahead and change it. So I wanted you to understand the difference between those two conditions and really what it means. Sometimes if if you're on the fence about a non-conforming, but you really like the project, well, that's kind of our way of saying, look, based on the project, it would be okay to change the zoning. Or, and if the project never happens, then we don't change the zoning, and if something else happens in the future and they redesign the project, maybe it's good, maybe it's not, well, then we'll analyze it at that time. But at least it's allowing for some consideration based on the merits of the project itself. And then I included a list of conditions that you'll typically see from comprehensive planning or public works. And then that rolls into my next slide, where we have different departments and agencies reviewing our applications as they come in, as they're submitted to our department. And they provide input. Some of the input is provided in the staff report, and you'll see that in the conditions, sometimes in the analysis, and sometimes we just get back comments that say no comments. But we do send it out to different departments and agencies, and so hopefully that information is in the report when it gets to the town boards. All right, next, town board meetings. As I said before, the applicants are provided the meeting dates and times. What I wanted to show you here is I wanted to show you a portion of the form where our staff, when they accept an application, they literally write the date of the meetings and who the meetings are with. So Enterprise, Winchester, it starts at this time, make sure you attend. Same thing with Planning Commission, the board. But why I wanted to highlight this part is we tell them, written, verbally, what they need to bring with them to the town advisory board meetings. And the reason being is we don't distribute the mapping information to you. We don't distribute the site plans once it's available online. But it's their responsibility to come and present their project to you. So we want them to come prepared. We want them to come prepared for you. We want you to be fully aware of what is being presented for that project. And so you'll still get people who come and say, I submitted everything I had, I this, I that. And that's fine, it's up to you. You can continue to hear them, you can hold them, have them come back, we'll get into that later. But we do tell them that they need to come prepared. And if they are not prepared, it may result in delays to their project, if it needs to be held over to a future meeting, and then we tell them what generally they should be bringing to these meetings. I won't highlight too much of this because Blanca went over it in her presentation, but just as with filing, I always say my example, you don't want me filing your file cabinet. I'll probably file it in some different way than what you would prefer to have it organized. But we also have links to the same records information that Blanca had showed you. It's on our comprehensive planning webpage under services and land use documents. You can go here and you can find the links that will take you to the pre-meeting document. The next slide. So you can click here and it'll take you to those applications that are kind of quote unquote in process. The next one will take you to the land use documents for any applications that have been approved. And then the next slide shows you a box of that application number, what it looks like, and that allows you in those two search fields, those are the numbers that you'll be typing in to search for it. So again, different ways of finding information. We have multiple ways of getting to different websites. We've just put it on ours to make sure that anybody who's doing comprehensive planning, current planning stuff can access anything that they need from our website as well. All right, planning's role. For those new members, what we do is for the town board and citizen advisory council meetings, we do have a planner attend. We have a planner attend for the meetings that are in the valley. We don't have a planner for all of the rural meetings. I would offer, if there's ever a complicated project that you feel that a planner would be provide some valuable assistance in, let us know. We can make that arrangement. If we've done it before, we can do it. We're happy to do it. And sometimes maybe it's just worth talking to a planner in advance of the meeting to get a better understanding of what, you're looking at. Maybe you don't need a planner to come out, but we do have planners staffing the meetings at the town boards. And just as you're not supposed to be an advocate, our staff aren't an advocate. They have no skin in the game if something gets approved or denied. They're really just there to help you from a procedural aspect of what the code is, maybe give you a little bit more insight to the project, but they also aren't the ones who necessarily reviewed the application, so they're not going to have all the details and all the knowledge and all the history of that application, but they are there, they are a resource, and they're there to help. And so I would say too, just as you treat everybody else with respect, treat them with respect. They work hard. They're there to help you. They want to be there. And sometimes, as Tiffany alluded to, you will have some difficult meetings to man, but they are there to help you. So it's a good reminder of that. Next, recommendations. This is where there's no one perfect way to provide your responses and your feedback to our department or to the electeds. But what I can tell you are some quick tips is look at the application that's before you. Again, I don't expect you to understand every single component of each use permit, but look at what is being proposed. As Tiffany said, if it's a design review, it's a design review. If there's doing certain waivers, they're doing certain waivers. But take time to understand the project. Take time to look at the documents. I'll go into, in the next couple of slides, what some of the staff reports look like and what you should be looking at, and then review staff's recommendations, and then your recommendations should be clear, and then most importantly, they need to be enforceable. Enforceable conditions really help, and unenforceable are really just that. We can't require somebody to work with the neighbor and work out the issues. That's how do you monitor that? How do you manage that? How do you know that that's been done? So again, and I'll go into enforceable conditions. So the next one is, Tiffany alluded to it earlier. If it's a design review and the zoning's already been approved, you're just looking at the design. The zoning is off the table. That was already approved by subsequent action, or maybe it was adopted by the board years ago, but you're looking at the design. You're looking at the architectural elevations, the site plan, the parking, landscaping, anything that's design related, that is before you. That is under your purview to look at, consider, analyze, ask questions, make modifications to. The next one is a little bit more complicated, but it's why I wanted to explain it to you. So not every project is just going to have one thing to look at. It'd be nice if they did, but not everything just has one thing to look at. And these are two different examples of where we have one project and they have multiple components to each one. And on the next slide, if you can see, it has, should have printed out a larger copy, but I think it was convenience store and it has alcohol sales. And then I'll highlight the fact that they want vertical metal siding, all right? So this is where you should look at a project and say, okay, what's related and what's not related? The alcohol and the convenience store, those are related, and you may not have an issue with that. Maybe you have an issue with the vertical metal siding. You say, I don't want the vertical metal siding. And in that case, if you don't like the vertical metal siding, you can approve all of those other use permits and the waivers, but you would not approve that vertical metal siding. But because you're also not approving the vertical metal siding, you shouldn't really approve the design review. So again, you have to know and understand what is related in a project. The next example could go one of two ways. So all of this is for an accessory structure. And each component, theoretically, if it was a custom build, you may be able to act on separately. So if you said it's fine that it doesn't need to be architecturally compatible with the main residence, but I don't like these other things. It would be fine if it was a custom-built accessory structure. But let's imagine that it's a prefabricated building that they're literally buying. They're going to tilt it up and put it on their property. Well, in that case, then if you don't like one component of it, you really shouldn't like the rest of it. So it's looking at the whole of the action to make sure that, again, you have an understanding of what's being approved or being requested, and that your recommendations make sense, that they're well thought out, that you understand the project, and then the recommendation reflects that. The next slide goes back to the recommendations. I will be honest, it's easiest just to say we approve it, we deny it. But we understand that sometimes that's not the case because you may like some components of it, you may not like other components of it. So these are just some examples of how you could formulate your recommendation on a project. If you like the project, and even if you want to change some of the conditions that are in the staff report, you can say, I approve the project, but I'd like to delete current planning number 2, or I want to replace it with this, I'd like to revise it with this language. That is completely acceptable, and all of that is taken into consideration when it goes forward to the planning commission or the board. You also have the option of holding an application to a future meeting. It should always be to a date specific, because otherwise how is the public going to know when it comes back unless it's put off for a long time and then we have to renotice it. I would caution you though that it should never be used as a tactic to stall or delay a consultant. We do have some times when, even though the town board has held it, maybe sometimes it'll go to the planning commission or the board and get acted on anyways. It's rare, but it does happen. And then in the cases where an applicant doesn't show up, what happens if it is held over to the next town board, our staff will call the applicant, let them know, hey, you didn't show up. It got moved to the next meeting. Sometimes they then show, sometimes they don't. You just have to figure out what you want to do from there. But that is also an option. And then, as we said before, you can deny parts, you can approve parts of it. But again, really understanding what you're looking at is going to help you formulate your recommendation and then what conditions you want to assign to that application. Going back to the enforceable condition, which is the next slide. If you want to add additional landscaping, don't just say add landscaping. What does that mean? I mean, it could be a tree, it could be a bush. It could be, some more rock. So we want you to be specific as to what you want. Where do you want it? What do you want it to consist of? So in this condition, we said, instead of just saying add additional landscaping, maybe you want to say 30-foot wide landscaping strips, so that means a width of 30 feet wide, and I want trees 15 feet on center, meaning there'll be a tree. Every 15 feet, there's going to be a tree, and I want it to be along the west property line because it doesn't need to be on any others. But so try to be specific with your condition so that we understand what you were trying to accomplish when you were making that recommendation, and also so it's clear of what impact we're trying to mitigate. Some additional considerations is that what we don't want is, so sometimes vague conditions, if it's vague, it could result later on in a subsequent land use application because nobody really knew what it meant and probably have to see it as a waiver of conditions in the future, or maybe they figured out that they can mitigate the impact some other way. But vague conditions can really cause a problem for not only us, but for the applicant as well, because it gets lost in translation. So again, making sure that you're very clear in your conditions and your recommendations is very, very helpful. If you're not sure about your recommendation or your conditions, ask the planner that's there. Again, they're a resource. They could help you formulate it. They're listening to it. They write conditions all the time. They could help you formulate that condition. Not a problem. And then some things that even we struggle with is an applicant may request to come in and waive their setback to 0. That might be okay with the town board. It might even be okay with the planning commission or the board, but they may not be able to get that because of the building code. Or it might be financially infeasible for them to do that because then they have to fire rate a wall. Well, nobody wanted to do that for an accessory structure that maybe cost, a couple $1,000s to build. So just because it gets approved through the land use application process doesn't necessarily mean that it may be feasible with the other departments based on their code regulations. And then last but not least, and Tiffany touched on this as well, is designing at the podium. When an applicant comes in and everybody has all these wonderful ideas for how this project could be redesigned, it's not sometimes that simple. It may result in additional waivers, additional land use, which means it's just got to come right back. It's got to get noticed, and it'll be right back before the town board. I'm not saying please don't do it. I'm just saying be mindful of it. And if there are significant concerns, what I would just say is maybe hold the application, express those concerns at the meeting, allow the consultant, the applicant to work with staff, and then come back with a revision. And then that way everybody's clear if it does require additional waivers, if it doesn't. But at least that information is known, because that may cause additional time to the applicant later on as well. And then last but not least, Commissioner Jones touched on this, transform Clark County. So transform Clark County at www.transformclarkcounty.com is the county's effort to rewrite our current comprehensive master plan and also our Title 30. Title 30 was last amended holistically back in 2000, but I would say it was more of a reorganization. It wasn't a complete rewrite. It is outdated, it has uses, it has some standards that are now very typical of what we see in current types of developments. So we want to make sure that our code is current, that it is flexible enough to handle some changes in the future based on development trends. But Clark County, Transform Clark County is this effort, and we are in the middle of it. We are just starting to kick off the development code portion, and the development code portion, I think, is where you all have your little fingers in, and so it's going to be really important to stay informed and stay involved, and we'll be committed to doing that as well, making sure that you're informed through this process. But Transform Clark County, if you go to the website, you can sign up for updates. You can see past surveys that were done, the results of the surveys. You could receive mailed notice or email blasts of any updates to Transform Clark County, but you'll definitely be hearing more about it in the upcoming months since we are just starting to kick off the development code portion of it. So with that concludes my presentation. Does anybody have any questions? So we have one for those people who were...
Yes, on the hold. Okay, with the COVID situation and everything, we've had holds on our meetings for 2 to 3 months. So if we put a person or an applicant on hold and it gets extended 2 to 3 months, do they come here and bypass us or what?
They can. So the reason that there's 3 weeks between the first town board meeting and the first, we'll call it public meeting in front of the planning commission or the board, is that it actually allows for one additional town board meeting to happen before it goes to the planning commission. So for purpose of this conversation, let's just assume that town board meetings are going to be back up, they're going to be running, and they're going to be on a regular schedule. You have time between the meeting that it was first scheduled and the public hearing at the planning commissioner board to hear it one more time at the town board. If it needs to be held beyond that, then we'll hold those meetings. In the situation of COVID where we've had to cancel some town boards, or even in the situations where there's no quorum and there's applications, those don't get held over to the next meeting. They'll just go forward to the planning commission and the board. Not to say that they'll act on it. They may hold it so that there could be neighborhood meetings in its place, maybe town board meetings, but there is a potential in those situations that the town board meetings would be skipped.
Oh, okay.
Sammy, we also have a couple of questions from our folks who are attending remotely today.
Okay.
The first is, what, if any, procedural changes are being considered to speed up or simplify procedures for the businesses and other employers to get back to normal And how can we, normal as we might be, and how can we help with that?
I don't want to say that's a complicated question, but that's a very loaded question. The Comprehensive Planning Department has been open, the Business License Department has been open. We want people to be back up and running. We've been flexible in certain allowances of taking place during the times of COVID to make sure that we don't have any undue regulations that would prevent somebody from continuing to operate. But we are trying to continue to be a resource to those businesses. In terms of streamlining, we have been working internally with the different departments to come up with strategies, again, to figure out creative ways where businesses can continue to operate, assuming that they are not required, they're not required to be shut down or closed. But procedurally, what we're looking at is in code going forward, and also we want to make sure that we remain to be flexible and we continue to work with business owners, developers, to make sure that we're not stalling, delaying their applications. I hope that answers your question, but there's only so much comprehensive planning can do, but we're trying our best to make sure that we're a resource instead of a block for businesses. And then we have one person in the audience, so if we can go to them and then go back to the online.
Okay, thank you. I have pages here. I'm up in the Northwest, and I mean, I was on the Lone Mountain Council years ago, and now I'm coming back, and in between those, well, kind of through it all, I'm your frequent flyer homeowner, and have been through this whole thing a million times. And I'm learning a lot of really interesting little nuances that none of us I've never known, and this has been years. So I'm wondering if I can take you to lunch and include a bottle of wine and see if we could just sit. Marilyn Kirkpatrick is working with us now on one. And I'll be honest with you, for a long time, this is the first one I've seen actually get something done that involved agreeing with the owners. You know, I kind of got to the point years ago that don't even bother, they're going to do what they want to do. But there's a lot of here that there's a lot of misunderstanding with the owners I work with. So if anybody wants to join us, but I'm serious as a heart attack. I mean, there's just, you know, like I didn't know the planning person that was at the meeting didn't do the original subjective ideas with, which doesn't sound like a lot, but both sides of the tables, I've been really relying on that, thinking, oh, this guy's been in all these books and he's seen, and if that's not really the case, there's a difference there. You know, he's kind of doing it on the wing too, and your people are great, by the way. But, so anyway, that's it.
Well, good. No, and to your point, there is a lot to learn. And again, we don't expect you to be planners by any means or to completely understand Title 30, but we want to make sure that you're aware that there is a lot to take into account during this process. And there's a lot, not every single application is the same. You have to look at so many different types of requests and proposals, and what answer you may have received for one project may not be the answer you expected on a different project. But again, that's why we try to have planners there at the meetings to be a resource and to help you. And again, wanted to point out how you can contact our planners and what information to look at on our staff report. So, thank you. Are there any other questions online?
I do have one more, Sammy. So what do you need or expect from the TAB or the CAC in regards to our input in the strategic plan, since it's about halfway through the process?
So when I say it's halfway through the process, it's really just now getting to where we're putting meat on the bones. For the comprehensive master plan, we've just drafted the goals and policies and presented those to the board. I think the last meeting in December, I think, is when it was. Yeah, I think sometime in December. So what I would say is to go on our website, look at that draft plans policies. Again, we are just starting to put the meat on the bones for the comprehensive master plan. For Title 30, we just finished up with a survey, but if you go on to transformclarkcounty.com and you sign up for web blasts, and there is, what I forgot to mention is there is one appointed person from every town board that is participating in Transform Clark County. And I say one appointed person, sorry. So one person from all the town boards and advisory councils is on we'll call it a working group that is participating and should be the liaison between the groups and the consultants and then the staff who are working on Transform Clark County to help spread the information. But if you ever have any questions, concerns, you can always give me a call, send me an email. For those listening, my phone number is 702-455-3129. You're also welcome to send any emails that you have questions on for Transform Clark County. I get it, and another manager will get this as well, but it's a generic email address, and it's transformclarkcounty@clarkcountynv.gov. County spelled out, yes, everything's spelled out, except for NV. NV is really just NV.
If you're part of Nextdoor groups or Facebook groups for your community, posting. I would just say one way to get the information out there, if you're on any Nextdoor groups or Facebook groups for your community, post the Transform Clark County if there's any more surveys, and so we get more involvement.
Correct. And retweeting our tweets, and I don't know what people do on Instagram. I just look at things, but it's on Instagram too. I just continue to share the information and be an advocate for the participation of residents, for your neighbors, your friends, anybody. We need people to participate. Would you repeat that? The email address for Transform Clark County is transformclarkcountynv.gov, and the GOV is short for government. We'll try, we're making it shorter. Any other online questions? Nope, that's it. Thank you.